Crimson Desert might be the biggest and most complex single-player RPG we've ever had. You've got fishing, cooking, alchemy, mining, banking, investing, the camp system, combat, 3 playable characters. I could really just keep going, but today we'll go through literally everything you need to know about Crimson Desert. Let's go! I'll start with something that I briefly covered in yesterday's video. That is about healing and instant revives and essentially just increasing your overall survivability. Now, in yesterday's video, I told you where you could get the recipe for the Palmer pill. Is it Palmer or Palmer? Let me know in the comments. But either way, you get the recipe from that near where you do start in the game. And if all you need is 15 herbs and 2 water, you can combine those to craft the Palmer pills, which will then allow you to instant revive if you do get downed, and you can just make an abundance of these, and I highly recommend you do, because if you do get down, you can just bring yourself back up. But what if you don't want to get downed at all, or just not die at all? You will need food. Now, all your healing, your stamina, and your spirit regen in the early game will mostly come from food items, other than just like their natural regen that you get from, you know, just being out of combat or attacking, things like that, right? Now, healing is the key one to focus on in the early game. With food, it's better to combine multiple types of food rather than create one food item using, say, 3 meat, for example, as you'll typically get more HP per item and add additional effect that way. The best early game recipe that you don't even need the recipe for, you simply just need to hit improvise, and then you can combine 1 fruit and 1 meat. Do this enough times and you'll actually learn the recipe, but what this will give you is the braised meat. This will give you a solid amount of HP and a little bit of spirit. Both of these are super beneficial. Spirit is consumed when you use any of like your special attacks, like the turning slash, things like that, and then HP is obviously your HP. So getting both of these back in one item, very beneficial and super cheap for the cost of 1 meat and 1 fruit. Now you can increase this by saying do 3 meat and 3 fruit, and you'll get like the next tier of it, and then it's 5, and then it's 10, etc. Now, if you want to get meat and fruit, meat can be farmed just anywhere in the world from any groups of animals, deers you find, or you can buy it in the Henan town right near where the cooking station is. And for fruit, apples are typically the easiest to find during the world. You can actually buy it from the vendor that's right near that cooking station as well. Or once you have unlocked it at your camp, you'll be able to grow your own apples and collect them that way. By the way, though, if you are short on cash, you could just rob the bank in Henan town and then maybe gamble it all the way. Hopefully you don't lose like I did in this clip.
Thank you for the wonderful time and money.
That'll teach you to teach me.
Now, as a bit of an extension from that first point, one of the biggest hurdles you face in the game is the difficulty from certain boss encounters, especially in the main story. The best way to alleviate this is via the Abyss gear, more on that shortly, and refining your gear. Refining gear is done at the smithy in major cities or at your camp once unlocked. Now, each of the steps in the refinement process will cost some materials, and the higher levels will even cost you an Abyss artifact, which is your skill points essentially. This is still worth doing even though it does cost 1. However, there is 2 things you should absolutely need to know before investing too much in the system. Firstly, you can inspect and then view the refinement information in your inventory screen for weapons and armor. Why should you do this? Well, it shows you how the weapon will upgrade across each step. So sometimes, for example, you might find a new weapon or gear, whatever it is, and it's hard to know if it's actually better than the gear you already have. If you've been upgrading a sword, for example, it's already rank 5. You find one that's new, but it's rank 2, and you can't actually compare the stats directly. This will then allow you to see what a weapon will look like at a certain upgrade, like rank level. Now, this will essentially stop you from having to waste those resources to get it to that level to directly compare, and it also allows you to see if that weapon gains any additional effects, as some weapons will gain, say, additional secondary effects like attack speed, critical hit rate, something like that as they do level up. So you can see that and whether that weapon's actually even worth investing in. Now, secondly, this is a big one. If you are spending Abyss artifacts to upgrade a weapon, 1, you can't get that artifact back, so do really consider that investment. You don't want to do this for every weapon and armor piece you come across. Now, if you've got, say, a new piece of unique gear that has an Abyss gear like slotted onto it that has a unique effect, and even if that weapon's like, say, not actually better, but you want that Abyss gear, what you should consider doing is not upgrading that weapon and simply take it out of that weapon, which I'll tell you how to do in a minute. Before I do that though, the last thing on refining, you'll find grindstones and anvils around the world. These will give you temporary buffs to your armor and weapons. Make sure you do click them. A +5 to your overall attack or defense, hugely beneficial. So whenever you do return to the smithy, click on the grindstone, get that extra attack buff. All right, Abyss gear. This is a big one. Now, pre-launch Abyss gear was called Abyss Cores, by the way. So if I flip-flop between these names, I do apologize. I spent 60 hours calling it Abyss Cores.
I was very confused by the whole thing, if I'm being honest.
What they did also do in that same patch is add a side quest that unlocks the witch at the start of chapter 3, rather than having to wait till chapter 5 like we did. Massive improvement, by the way. So the witch is located in the Witch Woods. Now, when you go and speak to her initially, you'll have a bunch of different options here, and they're all quite beneficial. Now, firstly, if you go into the buy option, you will be able to buy some recipes to actually craft your own Abyss gear, as well as sometimes an Abyss artifact or the Faded Abyss artifacts, which I'll tell you what they do at the end of this video. But basically here, the main focus is not necessarily on crafting the Abyss gear, which you can, if you do have the recipe, you can actually combine some of them if you've got the lower tiers to make the higher tier ones, which is beneficial because then, say for the same effect, that 2 would be it only takes 1 slot, right? Because you've just like doubled the effect because you've combined them. But the main focus here is actually on extracting out an Abyss core or gear, sorry, and then putting that into others. Say, for example, I have 2 different Abyss gear that will affect my turning / ability when I hit R1 and R2 together. One of them is like this projectile waves, and one of them is called ground surge, which is like this fire ability. What I can do by extracting it out of the original weapon it's from is put it both on this 2-handed sword, so when I use that one attack, both of these effects will trigger. Now, if you do want to know where to get this sword, by the way, that was in yesterday's video as well, which I did already link for you. But this is what I'm talking about, right? You can basically create your own like god tier weapons by extracting out these Abyss gears, putting them in other weapons, and then combining those effects that way. This will make such a difference to your overall effectiveness in combat, is learning how to use these Abyss gears and using them both on your weapons and your armor, and especially the special effects you can get from some of the unique ones from certain bosses, things like that, which I'll have plenty of videos to tell you where you can get all the best ones for that. Genuinely, this is a mechanic I didn't know existed until like 40+ hours, and that is because I never actually returned to the Institute after the main quest. So yeah, like big mistake there, because the research is an upgrade path that you can unlock a whole bunch of things from. You can get some better healing or elixir items, a couple of new mechanics, including the hot air balloon and more. Now, in the early game, there is 2 research points. The first is the Institute, which unlocks during chapter 4 of the main story. This is actually where you can research how to make the hot air balloon, by the way. It's a couple of upgrade points into this tree, and eventually you'll be able to learn how to make your own hot air balloon. You'll also be able to learn how to craft your own Faded Abyss artifacts by getting the recipe from one of these researchers here as well. Now, if you're unsure or you want to know which like marks on the map actually have research available, it's these ones that when you hover over them, they have those like gray or black circles, like there's a bunch of those. Those locations will have a researcher you can actually research stuff at. The second one is the Unreachable Village, which is definitely the one to get as soon as possible. You may have guessed by the name, it's actually unreachable when you initially are heading in that direction, that area on the map. Now, when you're near this region, you'll actually get knocked out and like pulled out of the forest. In order to actually stop that from happening and get there, you need to get knocked out a few times. I think it was like 4 times for me. Not exactly sure if there's a specific number here, but then near the camp where you wake up, a Shay will appear. You'll need to talk to them, and they'll send you on a quest where you'll basically need to travel to the other side of the forest and do something for them. I won't spoil too much about what that is because it's very cool and it's really easy. It's just a very cool moment. Once you've done that, handed that quest in, the village will be then open to you, and you'll be able to find the researcher in that village and learn about palmer leaves and all of those sort of things. So definitely well worth doing because they do have some elixirs you can unlock as well. If you are sick of your starting mount, you may as well go and find yourself a new one. You can ride all sorts of animals in the wild, but you can only tame a few, and in the early game, it's basically just horses. However, in a recent patch, they did add 5 legendary mounts that we'll cover later in this video. Now, to tame a horse, any horse in the wild, you simply just need to run up to it and hit ride, then there'll be a taming minigame. This will require a decent amount of stamina depending on the horse, but you'll need to hold down the left analog stick in the opposite direction that the horse is actually moving to fill up that bar. Once you have filled up the bar, the horse will be tamed, and you'll actually be able to see that horse's stats, which if you didn't know, every single horse in the game has their own stats that is different. Now, these horses can be upgraded by just simply riding them around. Every horse will have these different upgrade levels that you can upgrade by riding them around. You can get a double jump. You can significantly improve how fast the horse can move by leveling them up, hugely beneficial to do so. But you can also buy new gear for your horse at the specific vendors. There's one to the north of the Hernand Castle, and then you can even get one at your camp as well. But basically at these locations, you'll be able to buy like different horseshoes, etc., that you can improve your horse via that way. And at certain ones of these, there is a stable that you can actually buy horses from as well. I wouldn't recommend to do this in the early game. Just go and tame your own horse or stick with the basic horse. You'll be fine anyway. There are a bunch of hidden mounts out there, including legendary ones, but I will save those for another video. Maybe I'll give you one for free. Just to the south of the P in Payloon on the map, there is like a lake. At that lake, you'll find a white horse. All you need to do is run up to that horse and ride it as you typically would. This will require you to have at least put a few points into your stamina, as it did take me 2 tries, even having 2 full stamina bars. But this is a legendary horse called Roller that you can grab here that does start with an initial 4 in movement speed, which is the main reason you want a horse, right? Is because of that movement speed. It also has a ton of stamina. Very beneficial horse to grab really early if you're looking for a quick legendary mount. I've already touched on how difficult the combat can be, but there's a few things that you should know to really help your overall combat experience. Firstly, this isn't a button spamming action game. It isn't even really like an animation locked Souls game, to be honest. It's somewhere in the middle, but the key takeaway here is that holding a button versus pressing a button will often do something different. So a good example of this is that if you just press the dodge button, you'll do an evasive roll once you've unlocked it at the end of chapter 2, whereas if you double press it, you'll do like a back step. So what that'll mean is the back step is significantly shorter and it's much easier to get clipped by boss attacks, whereas the evasive roll is much longer, easier to avoid attacks. So if you're, say, spamming dodge trying to avoid boss attacks, probably going to get hit anyway. Now, another example is that things like your full light attack combos and your heavy attack combos, you can really just hold the buttons down. You don't need to like mash them and press them because it will do those full attack combos anyway. And then generally speaking, like spend time reading all the skills in the skill trees, learning what they do and if they're actually useful to you. Now, you can also dual wield, by the way, with Cliff, even though he always has a shield on his back. You can actually bring up like the weapon wheel and tab across, and you won't actually have a shield in that shield slot. You can put a weapon there, so you can have both weapons. And the weapon combos and dual wielding are actually very solid, so it is worth doing if you do want to dual wield as a different way to play. But if you're willing to test any of this stuff and you want to just see how it works, once you have unlocked your camp, there is a dummy near your camp that you can lock onto and smack around to test all of these different attacks. Ow, 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 ow. Speaking of the camp, by the way, Chapter 3 will unlock Howling Hill. This is your Greymane camp that you'll spend time recruiting and finding your fellow Greymanes to really build it out. Now, one thing to note is that after those initial main quest steps, this entire quest chain becomes a side quest with multiple different steps. This includes having to talk to Marius to get rumors about other Greymanes, so you can go out into the world, find those Greymanes, and then bring them back to your camp. This will then add them either as followers that you can send out on those mission dispatches to get various things, or say run a certain shop at the camp once you have those relevant camp upgrades. So even if you've upgraded the camp, if you haven't actually spent time to go out and recruit them, you won't have anyone to run those shops. Now, once you've completed enough steps, by the way, you'll get a mission to send followers on a dispatch mission that will upgrade your camp to like that next tier. You should really be focusing on doing this when it does become available, because that is where all those unlocks come from. Those new shops, those new features like the farming and the ranching, all of that is tied to those upgrade steps from those mission dispatches. So make sure you are doing that. But the main reason you want to do that is that once you've got a functioning camp with all of these different things, smithies, cooking, etc., you'll start getting resources and materials from your followers by checking the supply chest. This is also where any loot goes. If you don't collect it out in the world, it'll be filled up into this supply chest. It's really a godsend, like honestly. The downside is you can't put anything into this chest. You can only take things out, but it really helps alleviate some of the hunting and like material grind that's needed to, level yourself up and cook healing items and the Palmer pills, etc. Because you can just use this supply chest to pull them out once you have sort of got those resources gathering from those mission dispatches and just the people at your camp. Something else to note is that in the day 1 patch, they did add a teleporter right in the camp. Huge bonus, love that change. So now you can just teleport directly to the camp. You don't have to go through the multiple steps it took originally to get one there. One of the early frustrations that I had that did get changed a little bit with patches, but is still something to be aware of, is inventory management. Your inventory space was actually basically doubled with one of the patches that went live during the review period. So essentially now you will have a lot more inventory space, and when you unlock the other 2 playable characters, you'll get even more inventory space. But there's a few things to think about as well. Firstly, any recipes that you have learnt, you can sell the recipe cards because it will just give you silver, but also you don't need to hold the recipe cards to keep that knowledge. You already know how to do it. You can just sell that card, get the silver, and get the inventory slot back. The same is true for any posters and notes, etc. Once you have read them, you can simply get rid of them because you already have that knowledge. You don't need to take up that inventory slot. You can just ditch them. Now, if you need extra inventory slots other than these big moments we are mentioning, you can buy small bags from certain vendors. This will give you 1 inventory slot, and certain side quests will also give you medium bags, which is 3 inventory slots. Mostly these come from like the requests, especially in the early game, but any of these, when you're looking at rewards from a quest, if it says medium bag, that is 3 inventory slots, definitely worth doing. By the way, something to mention about those other characters is that they share the same inventory as Cliff, as well as Abyss artifacts. More on that in a little bit. So when you are switching to them, the same inventory slots, the same items, everything are all shared between them, other than obviously what they have equipped. So you will have a certain amount that you can have for all the characters in total, basically. And in a recent patch, Pearl Abyss changed the supplier chest to be called private storage and moved it into your tent at the camp. So you can now store items in here as well. By the way, if you haven't actually unlocked the camp yet, this chest is actually located in the temporary home near Hernan Castle, so you still have access to this storage and can put things in here right from the start of the game. Abyss artifacts are a big part about the game, but there's actually 3 different types of them. You probably noticed on the skill screen when you look at the top right, there's actually 3 different types of Abyss artifacts. That's true. There is 3 different types. The first one is the standard Abyss artifacts. These are essentially just the skill points that are available to you. These are found typically from puzzles in the world, where if you are at a location or if you're looking at the map, you see those circles that say mysterious energy. Typically, this could be a fast travel point, or it'll be a puzzle for you to complete that will give you an Abyss artifact. If you're ever trying to find these, by the way, if you get up high and use blinding flash, this is essentially a ping for Abyss items. That could be a fast travel point, or say an Abyss crescent, or one of these sealed Abyss artifacts. Essentially, it's anything like Abyss. Now, the sealed Abyss artifacts, by the way, are also Abyss artifacts that are skill points, except they're sealed and you'll have to do a challenge in order to unlock them. You'll typically get these from like these little shrines that you find throughout the world, and if you inspect them, you can see exactly what that challenge is, like what you have to do. Now, when you complete this, sometimes you get an Abyss gear, but you'll always get an Abyss artifact for doing so. Essentially, that's just another skill points. Well worth doing these challenges and keeping an eye on them and tracking them in your inventory. The final type is the faded Abyss artifacts. Now, these are essentially respec for all of your Abyss artifacts that you've spent in the skill tree specifically. You can buy these from witches, you can craft them if you have the recipe from that research institute we were talking about before, but you'll often find a few, or essentially enough, that unless you're respecing all the time, you'll have enough to do this. It's worth doing this sometimes if you just want to move your points around, like to try different skills, or say give yourself more HP or stamina for certain boss fights. Firstly though, speaking of where you should spend those points, stamina and HP upgrades, hugely important, especially stamina, right? Because you'll use stamina for combat, for running, for climbing, for puzzles, for taming horses, basically everything. Getting an extra stamina bar is very beneficial, and then HP obviously very beneficial regardless. Now, a couple of skills to point out that you should focus on in the early game. Focus, very beneficial. While you're focusing, your spirit will actually regenerate. The focus bar is like the little leaf in the bottom left hand side, by the way, and you'll be able to see this regenerate where focus is active. The best combat ability basically in the game is the blinding flash finisher. So initially, blinding flash, if used in combat, will briefly stun enemies. If you get the finisher, you can follow this up with a heavy attack. It has multiple chains as well, and while the enemy is stunned, they'll just basically take all that damage for you. Fantastic ability. Turning slash, light heavy attack upgrades, also pretty beneficial. I do like to grab these, especially to combo the heavy attack with with Nature's Echo in the Spirit line. Basically what that means is when you use like your heavy attack, you'll get like an Echo attack after it. So it's basically just like free damage. And then the Flight level 2 upgrade for Swift Flight is also beneficial because, yeah, I mean, you're going to be flying everywhere, right? So just being able to fly a bit faster when you jump off cliffs, everything like that, absolutely beneficial. By the way, as well, you will learn some skills by observing people using them in the world. Like there's even one at your camp actually that you can get. It does happen a lot in boss fights as well. So when you do this, you'll actually get the skill for free without having to use an abyss point. The last one I have is specifically for all of you thieves out there. Now, to unlock stealing and the other naughty activities, you'll need a mask. The easiest way to do this is to watch my best start video that I'll link at the end of this video because I tell you exactly how to do that in that video. But once you have a mask, you'll need that for all of your thievery, your stealing, pickpocketing, etc. By the way, if you want to pickpocket anyone, you'll need to see if they have something which you can actually do with your lantern out. If they have like a glowing pouch, there's something there for you to take. Now to take that, you just need to bump them and then you'll see a prompt to pickpocket. Then you can pickpocket them and then run out of that red circle so that no one notices you. You can just rinse and repeat this, do this as much as you like. You won't get a ton of things from it, but like, you know, you get some free materials, some free copper, nothing to sneeze at really. We obviously already talked about you could just go and rob a bank. But last thing that I want to talk about for thievery is keys. Now you'll run across a bunch of locked doors. In order to unlock these doors, there's a specific vendor to the south of Henan Town. There's a few of these actually out there in the wilds as well that you can buy keys from. These are just generic keys, but they will unlock all of the locked doors that don't require specific keys, which is most of the doors that you'll see that like the citizens and just like townsfolk have. Just by having this like blanket key, you can just like unlock that door and go into those places and take anything you like. So make sure you stock up on these if you want to do some thieveries. Firstly, we'll start with the Hound's two-handed sword. What this weapon is a two-handed blade that comes with Hound's claws. So on your R1 and X ability, you'll do like a more AoE sweeping effect that says it has blood-stained claws dealing additional damage. I do wish it had like a bleed effect or something on it, but essentially it turns like that R1X ability into a full AoE around you. Now, because this attack also affects Nature's Echo, you can then get buffs from using that Nature's Echo skill along with this and like combining these together. Really strong combo and quite an early weapon that you can get that has a unique effect on a weapon like this without having to travel all the way up into the north or like any other regions of the map. It's actually in Henan. It actually comes from a quest called Where Lands Meet Sky. This starts at the church in Henan. I didn't actually get footage of me walking up to the priest here, but it is at that church in Henan. And then you essentially need to follow that quest line, go to the Senia area, and then defeat all the enemies there. There'll be a boss at the end. Defeat that boss. He's not too hard, but do make sure you have a few Palmer pills with you and food items, etc. And once you beat that boss, you'll then be able to get the Hound weapon from there and take it with you from then on. My favorite weapon on this list is the Dark Bringer two-handed sword. This comes with Ator's Orb. Summon orbs that track nearby enemies after a short delay, dealing damage on impact. So anytime you use your heavy attack, as it's just your heavy attack, these orbs will spawn and then attack any enemy in the vicinity. I love effects like this, especially with a lot of the footage you're going to see here. I've actually combined this with the Crow's Pursuit, which comes from the boss at the end of chapter 5 in the main story, the Crow Caller. Now, after that, right, you've got two abilities then that trigger just on a heavy attack. Both of them are heat-seeking and will just attack enemies around you. Even if you're just swinging wildly, like sometimes I just get stuck just swinging at nothing, and then these orbs and the crows will go and heat-seek out enemies for you, even flying enemies, all the likes. Just like a really solid weapon. Also really like the way this weapon looks with like the yellow like ribbon off it. It just has a really nice aesthetic to it. Now, way up in the north to the west of the Silver Mountain, you will find the White Waste Sanctuary. This is where you'll find a giant skeleton that has this weapon lodged in its teeth. Now, you just essentially need to take this out. I also, just like a side note, why is there a giant skeleton here? That's just strange. Like, there's no other giants in the game that are this large, and it's just interesting. I wonder what the lore is there. If there is even lore, who knows? Moving on to a multi-parter, but mostly we're going to focus on the Fire Drake shield because this is a unique shield, but there's also a whole bunch of other stuff that we're going to include in this section here as well. So the Fire Drake shield, which is the main focus here, has Draconic Retribution on it. So when you tank hits into the shield, you'll charge up this effect. You'll know it's charged because the shield will glow like a red effect, and then anytime you use your shield bash, you'll then throw out this like fire projectile that'll explode on impact and like set enemies on fire, deal great damage, and just overall make a shield build a bit more valuable as I've always just been dual wielding essentially. But ultimately, really great shield with a really cool, unique effect. Sadly, you can't put Abyss Gear on this shield. This effect is the only thing that can be put on it. But by default, it does come with 7 defense and 2 movement speed, so it's actually pretty solid all around. Now, this shield is actually linked to a full set of armor called the Scorch Flame set, but on top of that, there is also like a sword that links with this as well, called the Sparta Sword, which you get at the same time you get the shield. So we're going to cover how to get all of this stuff here, just so you can set and build out this full kit essentially. So firstly, the shield and the sword come from a side quest called the Letter of Silence, which is actually in the Demoness region. I believe this unlocked after chapter 8. Do let me know in the comments if I am wrong. It's sometimes hard to track exactly when all these side quests unlock, but I believe it was around that point somewhere. Now, essentially, you just need to talk to the nobleman, grab this side quest, and then it will take you to a castle. You need to clear out that castle of enemies. There'll be a boss fight at the end. They'll actually be using this sword and this shield. You'll just need to beat them, and then the last steps of the quest is actually just go pick up the sword and the shield. The sword has attack speed 1, attack 1, and critical hit 1 on it, so nothing really special, but it is a quite nice aesthetic sword. It does come at rank 4, which isn't bad, so definitely can use if you do want to and fit this overall aesthetic. But I think what you'll really want is the Scorch Plate set that does really fit this aesthetic. So firstly, by completing this quest, you'll actually get a pair of these Scorch Flame Plate gloves, which comes with volcanic eruption, so you can imbue your fire element with it. But ultimately, you can actually just find these in the world too. At the Twilight Grotto Cave to the east of Demoness is where you'll find these, but don't leave this location straight away. The next ones are actually at that same location. So as you leave that cave, wing a left towards this hidden hideout called the Silent Falls hideout. In this area is actually a boss called the Gravewalker. Not too hard to defeat. If you do beat him, he does drop the Abyss Gear as well, just a couple of pieces of Abyss Gear that you can pick up, so worth doing. And then there are lanterns behind him that you can light, and then there is a spear called the Sorcerer's Staff here. This is basically just a standard spear, it doesn't have anything special on it, but I am going to tell you where you can get an incredible Abyss Gear later in this video that you can actually put on that spear, and just any weapon in general, but it just fits the aesthetic of that spear really well. So just hold on to that thought for a second. But the main reason you're in this area is for the Scorch Plate Cloak, which after you leave where you found the spear, if you look at that wall, and on the top right of that wall, you'll actually see a little icon where you can force palm. Now climb up to that wall and press resist, so you hold onto the wall, really important, and then force palm the wall, and you'll stay attached to the wall, spin around to the other side, and then inside that area is where you'll actually find the Scorch Flame Plate Cloak. Now, the last piece here is the Scorch Flame Plate Armor, which is located in Demoness as well. Now, it's located near the Golden Leaves trading post at this location. There's a little gap here in the wooden bricks or area that you'll have to crouch and crawl through. There's a chest in there that go and pick that up. I haven't actually found if there are boots for this set. Do let me know in the comments if there are boots. I'll pin your comment so we can all get it together if you do find it. I have no idea where the boots are for this set, so do let me know. Frozen Anguish is our next weapon. This is a two-handed sword that comes with Stamina Siphon. That's really the main reason to get it. So when you attack, you'll get some stamina back. Fantastic if you're spamming those heavy attacks with, say, Darkbringer or something like that. You can definitely combo those together, so then you can get some of that stamina back. You can then attack with those effects a bit more. Really beneficial. Now, this is a really hard weapon to get, but there is actually an easy way for this to happen, and funnily enough, it's actually to go and get the full armor set that's basically linked to this as well. That looks really cool. It has this really cool black aesthetic called the Frostkurtz Plate Armor. Really beneficial. It has a ton of ice resistance on it, and you're going to need that ice resistance to get the sword. The sword is located in this area that's covered in ice. You will need that ice resistance, or you're just essentially going to freeze to death. So we'll start with the armor, then I'll tell you where to get the sword, because it's all linked and it's all good stuff anyway. The Frostkurtz Plate Armor is located to the east of that frozen spire in the Mist Shard Cave. You'll then need to use the stab in the waterfall as you always do, and then grab these from the treasure chest. The Frostkurtz Plate Boots are located in the Well of Tragedy Grotto Waterfall Cave, which is to the west of the Hex Sanctuary, a little bit further away. The Frostkurtz Plate Gloves are located in the Lunar Spirit Grotto Waterfall Cave to the west of the Hex Sanctuary. quite close by to the other one, slightly south of the previous location where you just found those plate boots. The Frost-Cursed Plate Cloak is located in the Sanctum of Expiation to the southwest of the Frozen Spire. Now, you'll need to use your focus light to burn the vines here and then crawl through the gap. Don't get stuck in here like I did. For some reason, like I literally couldn't get out. Felt a little claustrophobic, but I actually just had to like teleport out here. Everything was fine, but definitely had a mild panic attack that I was just like stuck in this location for a while. The Frost-Cursed Plate Helm is located to the southeast of that sanctum that we were just at the Chattering Rocks. In this location here, you'll need to use your focus light again to burn the vines here. And then inside that location, you find a treasure chest that has this plate helm on it. So the reason we're using this armor is because the cloak itself has ice resistance level 5, and then the plate armor has ice resistance level 7, and then the gloves have like a abyss core that gives you more as well. But essentially you need that ice resistance so you can go to this location without essentially freezing in place. Now, once you're at the Frozen Spire, which is to the west in Paloon, which is where you'll find the Frozen Anguish sword, you'll need to destroy the ice around the lantern outside and then light the lantern. You can destroy the ice using like your force palm, your turning slash, like setting it on fire, all sorts of things, and then light the lantern. That'll open the front door. Inside, just underneath the stairs to the right, is where you'll find a treasure chest that has this sword in it. Now, you can obviously complete the puzzle here, go up to the abyss, definitely worth doing, but this will get you the sword if you just want to do that and then leave the location. Okay, I did mention that I'll give you a amazing abyss gear for that spear. That is the Queen's Fang. I wanted to include this because it's not technically a weapon. It is just the abyss gear, and you can put it on your weapon. It's really cool, and it poisons enemies. I just generally like this effect. So the Queen's Fang triggers when you use your stab attack. It sprays Spider-Man forward, dealing damage to enemies hit, and then the poison effect will like linger on enemies for a little while afterwards. Combining this with the spear is great because spears have like really good stab attacks, but generally any weapon using a stab attack, you can put this on. Great to use. Now, this comes from the Arbora Castle in the Hill of No Return. It's actually a quest here that is tied to like clearing this area called Queen's Nest that you'll need to destroy the boss here as well. I think this unlocked in chapter 7, but do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about that. You'll need to clear the spiders, and they can essentially one-shot the spiders, by the way, just with your bow, and then you need to fight the queen afterwards. The queen fight isn't too bad. Just be really patient when she's on the wall, dodge the attacks, wait for her to land, and then just wail on her, and you'll essentially be able to beat her pretty quickly. And then after that fight, and you complete this quest, you'll get the Queen's Fang, as well as the Stirrups of Open Sky, which are these boots that have increased grip on them. So when you wear them, you have a reduced chance of slipping when you're hanging onto walls, so they're also great, but the main focus here is on that Queen's Fang, which you can then just insert into your gear. We shall start with something that you can literally steal at the start of the game, and that's the Saint's Necklace. Now, even if you're not a thief and want to be an honorable Greymane, you probably should steal this, honestly. Now, if you don't know how to get a mask, do check out my video. I'll link right here. It'll tell you exactly how to do that, because you will need the mask to steal. But what you're looking for here is the Saint's Necklace. Now, this necklace gives you defense 5, and the main kicker here is the vitality bonus. Now, this is an effect that triggers when you hold both of the triggers together, or if you just select it from the radio wheel. This will restore a good portion of your stamina. This is just amazing for climbing, gliding, swimming, etc. It's basically a free stamina regen on cooldown to give you a massive chunk of stamina. Now, this actually saved me when I got stuck in the ocean. More on that in a little bit, but it's an amazing way to get some extra stamina. Plus, it also has 5 defense on it, which is better than basically any necklace you'll get in the start of the game. This is located at the Hillside Manor in Hernand Town. You'll need to go inside the building. The window here is the best option, and solve the puzzle. Now, the puzzle is kind of annoying, but basically you need to line up like the middle section of those pins to the wooden section. Once you've actually lined them up correctly and you press the button that lifts up the pins, you'll know you've done this right, as you'll be able to turn the knob and actually open the strongbox. Then you can steal the Saint's Necklace. For some reason, I immediately got arrested when I left this building. I think that's a bug because I've been stealing quite a lot of things in Hernand Castle, but you'll be able to get this necklace hopefully and get away scot-free. The Dark Ringleader is an amazing set of gear that you can get all of the different pieces, and what's great about this is it requires very little actual investment in the early game, and all of the pieces more or less will give you an abyss gear already on it, which in the early game you basically won't have any gear that just has abyss gear on it. This does take some time to actually get to, which I have talked about in other videos. But what we'll do here is go through each piece individually, and I'll tell you where you can get it. We'll start with the Cloth Helm. This gives you 1 defense and 1 movement speed initially, but it does come with stamina regen plus 2%, and this is located in the Shadow Heart Grotto, which is west of Hernand Castle. Now, this is really important. This is a waterfall cave, and there are lots of these in the game and also in this video itself. So I'm only going to mention how to get past the waterfall once, so I'm not repeating myself. Now, if you see someone in the comments saying I didn't explain how to do it, or they just don't know how to get past the waterfall, you have my full permission to laugh at them, because I'm going to explain it right here. So firstly, you need to find these stacked rocks. This will show you where the entrance to that cave is. Then you'll need to use the stab ability to be able to get past the rushing water current. Like, you'll essentially line up this attack right next to the rushing water current, and then this will like push you through that current and you'll actually land on the other side. Sometimes you'll still like get hit by the current, but you'll be on the other side anyway. So you've basically made it through. Then just follow the cave. At the end, there'll be a bunch of chests. Typically there'll be a couple of extra ones, just give you some extra stuff. And then the main treasure chest will have this cloth helm in it. The next is the Dark Ringleader armor. Now this comes with 3 defense and a little bit of movement speed as well, plus an abyss gear with movement speed. It also comes with damage reduction 1.0 and spirit regen every 1 second. Absolutely fantastic. And you get this from the Blade Cave, which is at the west of the Hernand Castle. The Dark Ringleader's cloak comes from Echoing Tunnel. This is south of Hernand Castle. It's a waterfall puzzle, as you probably guessed. This was actually the first one that I found. And the last one is the Dark Ringleader's leather gloves. These gloves are actually really good as they give solid attack and defense and critical hit rate as well, even just at that 1 tier of refinement. Now, the downside here is it does come with ice resistance level 1 as its abyss gear. Now, you can change this obviously once you do unlock the Witch in chapter 3, but it does come with defense plus 3, which is fantastic. This comes from the Cloud Mist Cave, which is southwest of the Hernand Castle. It's the most south of all of these different caves that you can find in these waterfalls. But now you've got the full set and you can rock this through Hernand. But what if you want to wear a different set of armor? Well, that would be the Fallen Kingdom set in the early game. Now, there's a few pieces to this, but it's not a full set like the Dark Ringleader, even though that is missing some pants. But essentially here, the main piece that you want to grab from this, and just generally the main piece and the best piece, is the Fallen Helm. This comes with Turning Slash plus 35%, which is an insane damage buff to your Turning Slash. This is the Abyss gear that it comes with. Now, the downside to this helmet is that it is giant, it's obnoxious, and I just simply didn't like the look of it, so I extracted this core out and put it in a different piece of helmet, and I just ditched the old helmet. I sold it, so I don't even have the full set anymore. I can't even wear it. But this helmet does come from the Sanctum of Benediction to the southwest of the Icemore Castle ruins, where you fought the Stag Lord. Now, you'll need to light the lantern and it'll unlock the secret door, and then inside that room is where you'll find the chest that has the helmet. Next is a two-parter. It's the Fallen Kingdom cloak, as well as a rapier for Damiane. It's actually a really good rapier. It also sells for a bunch if you're not even going to use it. Now, this is actually located in the Icemore Castle ruins, which is where you fight the Stag Lord. You don't have to go here first. Like, you can find him before or after. It doesn't matter, or come back. Now, towards the back of the castle ruins, like well behind that initial fighting arena, is where you will find a little walkway that you can crawl through. There is some boards here that you'll need to smash with an attack, and then inside that little area you'll find a fair few copper pouches. Make sure you pick those up. In the treasure chest you'll find the cloak, and then to the left, leaning against a barrel, is actually where you'll find the rapier. Make sure you grab both of these. And then the Fallen Kingdom gloves, these are located in the Starlight Storm cave to the west of the Hernand Castle. This waterfall is quite large. It's like halfway up-ish that you'll need to stab through, and once you have done so, you'll find the chest in there that has the plate gloves. These have food effect on them, by the way, as well as a health benefit, so really good for the early game, so you get that additional HP, and then you can refine these to obviously improve their overall benefits. The Stag Lord shield is my favorite out of all of this stuff. Now, this does come from the House Circus quest lines. You'll need to do the Lord Amidst the Ruins quest, which at the end is when you defeat the Stag Lord at those ruins we were talking about earlier. Now, this is northwestish of the Hernand Castle area. You'll find the starting quest during chapter 4, I believe, in like the surrounding hillside, but the conclusion happens at those Icemore Castle ruins that we mentioned, where you can actually go to and fight the Stag Lord. By beating him and completing the quest, you will get the shield. By the way, if you want the chest piece that I'm wearing right here, it's the Dustfang leather armor. It's actually found in the Whispering Grotto waterfall cave in the Hernand Highlands, same as you do all the other waterfall caves. The flower petal earring, not only does this earring give you 5 defense, which is significantly more than basically every other earring in the early game. You don't have to really invest much into it. And it plays a little tune when you do the double triggers, or if you just select it in the radial wheel like we were talking about with the earlier vitality. It basically functions the same.
Good day.
Now, this just plays a little tune. You can then trigger that effect again to turn it off. Whether you're going to use this for the tune, I don't really think so. Mostly you're using this for the 5 defense, honestly. But it is a cool little neat effect, and that location where you get this from, you actually get something really good as well. So this comes from the Mudringe Cabin. This is southwest of the Hernand Castle, near the Unicorn Cliff. You'll need to move sort of past that. There's a strong box at the Mudringe Cabin. It's kind of annoying, to be honest, because you'll need to move these fragments around, and it's quite difficult to make this tree picture. I probably didn't do this like the fastest, best way, but I will just play you the full puzzle piece here. So if you just want to copy the exact movements that I did, you'll be able to complete this puzzle, but was kind of annoying to complete. Now, at this location as well, you'll find the Goblin King's Treasure Dagger. This is hidden underneath the other cabin at this location. This gives you a 10% chance to get extra hide when you're skinning animals. Honestly, it's just well worth grabbing because you're going to skin a bunch of animals. Hide's very valuable for refining any of your armor, like all the cloth pieces we were talking about earlier in this video. Now, similar to this, there's actually a mining option called the Knuckle Drill that gives you 10% extra chance to get additional mining resources when you do mine. I will link my video right here if you want to know exactly where to get that from. Right nearby the catfish, by the way, there is a shipwreck where you can get the Widow's Plate Helm that has the unique Rising Torrent effect on it. So after you get hit by damage, if you press the circle button to evasive roll, there will be a Rising Torrent that will actually damage enemies every time that you do this effect. This is actually located in a shipwreck directly to the south of the catfish called Sea Haze Shipwreck. There will be some of those pirates here. You'll just need to take them out. And then in the treasure hoard, you'll actually find this helmet. You can actually see it on the map as it's highlighted by a little white icon. All of the unique items, by the way, if you do see them on the ground, that they will have this same little icon on the ground too, so do just pay attention to your compass if you do see that icon. Now lastly, I've got the Pirate King hat, which allows you to detect treasure. What this does is, much like Sting glows blue when orcs are near, the feather will glow white when treasure is near. I do wish the radius here was a little bit more so we can easily know when we're sort of near treasure chests, as you do have to be quite close to them, but you know, I hope they change that. But even still, it's still fantastic because you'll actually be able to see if there is a treasure chest near you if you're, say, walking around houses or something, and you know, you might just accidentally miss one that are behind secret walls. Now this is located in the Singing Catfish off the shore to the south of the Steel Mountains. You'll need to grab a boat from the shore here at the rumor-ridden fishing village. Now, by the way, when you get here, this village will be under attack by the same pirates that do run that ship. Now, you don't have to defeat them. You could just take a boat, go out there, grab the helmet, everything will be fine. However, if you do choose to clear the fishing village and defeat Sir Catfish, you can get a unique helm from doing that as well. So just an extra benefit there, but you don't have to get the Pirate King hat just for that detect treasure benefit. So we're going to start, have a bit of a wander through the camp. I'll step you through a lot of the basic stuff, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of trading, farming, and ranching, which is sort of the core mechanics that unlock over time with the camp. And speaking of unlocking over time with the camp itself will unlock as part of chapter 3 in the main story, Howling Hill. Now, this will unlock like the initial camp, which looks very different to the camp that you'll see on your screen here. But as you progress through chapter 3, you'll start getting the basics, and then it all moves over to this Greymane's line in your faction quest, specifically the grounds of the sunrise. Basically, the entire progression for your camp, including vendors and unlocking all the mechanics, really comes from progressing through Embers of Return and Gathered Will, as they are collectively work together. But you'll also get progression from the Solid Foundation as you get further as well. But it all sort of comes from these lines. So it is important that when you do finish the initial part of the quest in the main story, that you move off and do these Greymane quests to actually advance your camp, because there's just so much value in everything you get here. Basically, what I want to do here is I'll step you through all the different vendors, including the secret one and a couple of other things. But firstly, every single one of these vendors, including Bryce here who runs the wagons, and every single person, all comes from having to actually go out in the world and recruit them from these grounds of sunrise quests. All of these reuniting ones where you go out and find them, you do get abyss artifacts for doing this as well, so it's worth doing that for the sake of it as well. But these will actually give you these individuals that will come back to your camp, and then from there you'll be able to unlock them and unlock their vendors if they do have vendors, or they'll just be added as part of the initial Greymanes that you can send out on these mission dispatches. But it all sort of hinders on this system. So starting with Bryce here runs the wagons. Now, when you talk to him, we can retrieve and repair my wagon, so it comes back here. I have a freight wagon, but you'll be able to manage the cargo on the wagon as well as load the wagon with various cargo as well. A little pro tip, that if you are sending out and walking your wagon to the very end of the map, which you will often do if you want to do a lot of the trading, which we'll get into a little bit later in the video, if you just repair and bring the wagon back like I did, you'll still keep most of the resources that it has. So my wagon, now that I just repaired it and brought it back, and it was way off in Damiane at that time, I do still have some of the resources, as I did have some packaged honey. So it just saves you from having to actually trek on the wagon a little bit, but we'll get into that a little bit later. This gentleman over here, Ross, is where you will send out your comrades onto missions. Now, this is really important. So these mission dispatches are used for several things, but namely 3. Firstly is upgrading your camp when you do those upgrade camp steps. Secondly is changing things in the world, like say adding a bridge to a location or other structures at request of NPCs, and farming resources for that top resources in your camp that you can see there without any effort from you, as well as even giving you resources yourself. So basically what you want to firstly focus on is that upgrading the camp. Now, essentially, you're just going to need to make sure that you have enough resources up there for those various camp steps to upgrade. And the way you do that is by sending out the Greymanes onto various missions. So if you send them on an apple harvesting mission, not only will I, out of this, get 8 apples, as you can see, as the total reward, but we'll also get 2.2 camp provisions from that, so that'll then further increase. Now, these ones that are just these singular missions, these will go on retainer and will just continually refresh, so the mission will stop and restart every time it completes. You don't have to actually do anything. As long as you have the resources for that to happen, you can check in your notifications here, end mission and restart. So every day, or however long these missions take, they will end and restart again. You'll get the resources and they'll go again for actually getting them. Basically, what you want to make sure you have achieved here when you're setting up these is you want to have at least 1 mission with comrades sent off for each of the various types here. So, for example, the estate security here will give us currency, as you can see in the total reward. Egg harvesting here not only gives me eggs, but it also gives me camp provisions. That is one you want to maximize as well, because that will be used for basically all of these other ones, plus a lot of the other benefits and the other ways that you send people on mission dispatching. So do make sure you have a lot of those camp provisions. The logging will obviously give you timber for your camp, and then simple crafting will give us the armor, which is next to the amount of comrades you can see up the top there. And then we've got a couple more of those going, but we've also got mining for stone, which you'll get as well. Now, you want to make sure you've got one of these going, or multiple of these going for each of the various ones. You will need multiple of these as you get further along. But the other things to note about these missions is that the currency is one of the hardest ones to get. So having multiple people working on currency is definitely valuable. Something that I should do with some of these ones that are on these estate security, which is typically how you get that currency, is I should actually change who is on these missions, because this is before I had enough contribution. As you can see here with this egg harvesting, it says Greymane contribution, and then same with, there was another one right here, simple crafting says Greymane contribution. So that is not actually using one of my Greymanes themselves in manage comrades. It's not using a comrade, it's essentially just using a worker that you can get via your influence with Greymanes or via your influence with the church, rather than having to dispatch a ton of your own workers. That'll then allow you to spread them out more. So for example, if we go into mission structure here and this estate security one, if we just cancel this mission for them and then we can restart it, we can go here and you can see conversion is plus 50%. Because I have a lot of conversion from the church in this region, I'll get additional rewards here. But on top of that, I can say send Ryan. You can see now skill increases to plus 100%, so the total reward is more because Ryan has skills in the escort missions that this is. And then rather than sending Sylvan on top of that, which something to note is that you can't double up those skill benefits, you only need the one person for that, I can instead hire a contribution worker to fill that gap. And so that'll cost us 4 of the Greymane contribution, and we'll say yep. That'll then give us a little bit more reward because we're using Comrade here. So this will then now give us a total reward of 5.5 currency. Now we're only using one of our companions. I can then dispatch that. That mission will just run on retainer. You won't have to pay that additional Greymane contribution cost anymore. It'll just simply sit there, run on retainer, and you'll get that 5.5k every time that in progress bar that you can see at the estate. That 17-hour in-game time completes and resets. It will just keep going that over and over. By the way, contribution is increased either by donating camp currency to the church directly or by doing the quests for the church specifically that you'll get in like the Henan region and the other regions as well. The next thing that you want to make sure you are automating here is food production. So a couple that I like to have, one being apple harvesting, because I love using apples to create food like the braised meat that I've touched on in videos, as well as other stuff. So you can get apples here just automatically. And then another one is meat, which I have running here from the marbled meat butchery found in the Cheven Holt Ranch. So this will give me 50 marbled meat every basically in-game day. Now, any of those resources that you are collecting that are actually for yourself, they will appear in your private storage chest, which has been moved into your tent, by the way. So if we open up this chest here, we've got a couple of marbled meat here. We've got some apples from that. And then I'm also getting barley from another mission as well. So basically what that allows me to do is take out these resources every time I come back to my camp, travel over to a cooking station like right here, and cook and create something with those ingredients without actually having to go out and farm them myself, right? So, you know, I got that barley, I got that marbled meat. I can essentially just create a bunch of these satisfying clear soups or a bunch of these satisfying fruit punches. I can just make 6 of those. Fantastic. So basically what I've been doing is every time I come back to my camp, now that these are set up, I just grab those resources out of my chest, make the food items that I need, rather than having to go out and say farm them like you might typically have to do. But it's also worthwhile keeping some of those resources for the ranching stuff, which is hidden over there somewhere, that we'll touch on in a little bit. So back to our gentleman Ross here. So when you are looking at your mission dispatches here, do pay attention to the rewards that you can get. So for example, with this trade goods silk crafting that we canceled earlier, I can actually get that packaged good so that I can go and sell it, which will cover that stuff in a little bit. But you can also get things like the spider web collecting here, or a fishing rod that I got from research. But on top of that, you've got other options for not only food production, wine, fish, basically everything that you could possibly want. Milk will be found here, poison arrows. The way that you actually find these locations is via the map and actually exploring and going to these locations. So sometimes you'll have locations that you will need to clear out first, like before you can use them for the mission dispatches. Like any of the major locations that enemies are at, you'll have to clear them out before you can use them. But a good example of this is the time-worn ruins that you'll see over here. Now, this is a mission dispatch that you can send in the much later game. I wouldn't be sending this in the early game. But once you have cleared out this location, you can actually send your Greymanes here and just harvest Abyss artifacts on rotation. So same thing again, at that task time of 3 days, every 3 in-game days, that'll just completely cycle through and you'll get an Abyss artifact. 3 in-game days may sound like a long time, but it's not actually that long. Now, it does cost quite a lot of resources. I wouldn't be doing this in the early game. This is more of an end game thing, but you can do that, as well as Ordek Ruins down here is where you can actually farm gold bars for the same way and very similar cost. I think it is 3 days in-game as well. No, it's 4. You can farm gold bars from these ruins as well. So you can then get these things that basically everything you want and just automate the whole process. But it's much more of a late game thing that will require a lot more investment, because you'll need to make sure you've got enough of those currencies in order to just keep these going so you get them back. Now, moving on to our other vendors, we do have our camp contribution person here, Carl. Now, Carl gives you a couple of options. Firstly, you can recover items if you've missed any of like the cuckoo pot items out in the world, like those abyss items that you seal in your cuckoo pot. These will appear here, especially before you've unlocked your cuckoo pot. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, don't worry, they'll appear in this recover item section. The camp provisions is what you'll want to pay a little bit of attention to, but not a ton. So what I've been doing, and a good thing to have rule of thumb to do, is when you have an absolute ton of money like I do, and just generally when you get to the later game, is dumping any of like the cheap weapons and things that you get that you don't actually need into this, right? So this will just give you a little bit of those resources rather than you having to actually go out and send the mission dispatches or anything like that. There is a couple of side quests tied to it as well. The other thing to pay attention to is that any unpackaged goods, you can give them to Carl. They will become packaged goods. You'll need at least 25 of them to then take them out, but you'll be able to take them out and use the trading system at the trade post to then make camp currency from that. Behind Carl over here, we have the first of the really important vendors, which is Ronnie. Ronnie is your camp food vendor. So here you'll be able to buy water, barley, etc., a bunch of resources from him. Now, I have always been just buying a lot of these food items, and these will continue to grow as you progress through the game, because any of the vendors that you see in the game, like the taverns or equipment vendors, etc., if you maximize your trust with them, like we do have max trust with Ronnie here, but if you increase your trust to max level, you'll be able to get a supply contract with that vendor. So then some of their inventory can actually be purchased from camp. For things for Ronnie, which is typically from taverns, that's just like the food items that you can see here. But then if you've got something like the gentleman over here for our equipment vendor, Trennan, if you talk to him, you'll actually be able to get the stock from all of the different equipment vendors in the world. Equipment vendors is one of the easiest ones because increasing their trust just simply requires hide, which is so easy to do. But then you'll get a bunch of these that you could buy, like all the different weapons and things from the stores. But he also sells you ore. So if you don't want to go out and hunt ore, he will sell you them on retainer, as well as these will refresh every couple of days. Next to him, by the way, is where you get stuck on this pole, but you also have the smithy, so you can actually do smithing here rather than having to go back to the Hernan town. Connor here will sell you a couple of other ores, which you should absolutely be buying, especially silver ore if you want to make gold and things like that. But he'll also sell you some jewelry if that's of interest to you. Now, this gentleman here is a very interesting one. So Diedrich is a hidden camp vendor that you won't get by progressing. You'll actually need to find him out in the world. The reason that he's important, though, is because he sells you the full set of Grey Wolf leather gear. So you can actually get the full set just by getting him to your camp, and then you can look essentially like the cover art. But the helm that you can see me wearing is actually the Alpha Wolf helm. There's no actual helm for the Grey Wolf set. It just kind of matches the aesthetic. Dietrich, you'll need to go to the Red Fox trading post all the way over here, which is in sort of the north of Demonis, way away from your camp. But at this location here is where he will actually be, and he'll give you a little quest that'll send you over to the Stone Crab area. Once you've done that, he'll then migrate to your camp and be able to purchase all of those goods from him as basically your tanner. As we move along, in the 4th camp upgrade, you'll actually get Eric, which is the barber, so you can change out your not only your look, but also the look of Oongka and Damiane as well, with different haircuts, some beard styles, and then some couple of tattoos as well. Next to him, you have the Provisioner. Now, the main thing you want to purchase from the Provisioner is not necessarily the tools, which you can if you do need them, but after all of that, you've got all of the hide options, so you can buy these on retainer, and he has much more stock than if you were buying these in town. Obviously, you can go and hunt these resources as well, but fleece is a massive one, as in the early game, this is a really hard one to find that you'll need in order to upgrade your cloak. You can actually get fleece automatically via your ranching, which we'll touch on in a bit too, but it's a really good way to get fleece in the early game is via Winston over there. And then with the 4th camp upgrade as well, you'll get Oliver the dyer, who can then dye your gear if you wanted to, say, change the look of anything. But you'll need to actually go out in the world to not only get the dyes from the different dye vendors, but he will sell you the shadow grey dye if you do want to get that sort of grey wolf look. Next, we have our farming specifically, which we will cover separately in detail. But basically from Kemu here, you'll be able to buy the initial couple of seeds as well as wild ginseng, which is from an upgrade for research. But you'll be able to buy apple and grape seeds, and you can get seeds out from other provisioners out in the world. They'll sell you seeds once you have this upgrade as well. But alternatively, if you do need seeds and you don't have any available, if you have the fruit, you can actually click on it and obtain the seed that way. So then you've got the seed itself and you can actually plant it. We grab this seed, mosey on over here. We can then plant the seed and it will grow an apple tree. As we move over here, we've got Conrad, who is a furniture vendor that you can buy furniture from. A huge, big tip with furniture and buying furniture, which obviously you're probably going to be using in your house, which is across the bridge over here, your home over here across the bridge. But if you are upgrading your camp, so when you're going through those camp steps in the ground of Sunrise, where you camp actually upgrades, like these expanding your camp, it will reset everything that's in your house. So don't spend all that time decorating your house until you've got all the upgrades done and actually moved yourself to Payloon as well. And then the last of the vendors beyond the stable, which we didn't touch on, but the stable is over there, is the ranching, which we'll have a whole section for about how to get them and how to farm them, just a little bit of the video. But let's start with the first one that you unlock of these, which is the wagons and trade goods. So the trade goods are one of the first that unlock, and wagoning in general. Now in the early game and in small quantities, when you do find unpackaged goods, they can actually be sold for silver for Cliff by taking them to any of the black market trading vendors. There is one right in the center of Hernan Town, by the way. Essentially you just need to go here and you can sell these unpackaged trade goods for silver. Well worth doing in the early game, as an easy way to make silver. But once you do get enough of these and you start banking in some of these unpackaged goods, you can add them to Carl for camp provisioning, like we mentioned earlier. But then they will become packaged goods and they can actually be sold for camp money specifically. But there are a few steps you need to know first. Firstly, you'll need to progress to at least that second upgrade in order to get Bryce as a recruit. Then you'll need to do his request that will allow you to build a wagon, and wagons can then be built from the Timber Turner Wainwright. Now you can actually sell wagons nearby to him, by the way. If you have stolen wagons, you can then sell it right near where that Wainwright is. Now you're ready to really sell packaged goods. But also worth noting is that your horse can also carry 1 to 2 slots of packaged goods. This does make selling goods a bit easier, as you can essentially buy some trade goods from one end of the map and then fast travel to the other, summon your horse because you need your horse to be there, and then sell them. Like say for example, if the prices of buying a resource here are really low, but then at another location on the other side of the map, the prices of selling them are really high, you can quickly buy them and then move to the other side and then sell them for those camp resources. But the main thing that you'll really be doing as more of a late game thing is the packaged goods and actually using them with your wagon. So any of those deposited unpackaged goods that you put into your camp provisions will cost you 100 camp currency to do so, to like package them up. And then you'll need at least 25 of them before you can take them out and actually go and sell them at a trading post. Now these trading posts you'll find all throughout the map, and if you click on them by going into details, you'll be able to see what they buy and sell and for the current rate of what they're buying and selling. Another thing to note is that you can package up camp resources like weapons, food, stone, etc. if you have excess of them, and go and sell them somewhere as well. But generally the thing to think about here is that with your wagon, you essentially want to put any of those unpackaged goods into Carl. Once you have got enough of them, you want to find where you can go and sell them. Or you can go and sell resources. Like in the example here, I've gone to the Gold Leaf camp, bought some resources, and then I'm going all the way up into Demonis to actually go and sell them on my wagon, because I'll make a decent amount of money from selling them at that location. But the other thing to point out is that you will have to manually travel yourself there via the wagon, which will take time. It is a long way to do this. So do keep that in mind. And that's sort of why the trade goods in general is something that I wouldn't be investing in too early. And then because of the mission dispatches as well, you can basically get all of these camp resources anyway, including the currency that you'll need enough of to actually upgrade your camp and everything. Ranching is another important part of the camp itself. Now there's a few things to think about when you do unlock ranching. You'll only initially be able to buy chicks that will grow into hens and roosters. They will then give you eggs from the hens and then feathers from the roosters, but you can butcher them to get just more of their normal resources as well if you choose to. But it does mention that you can increase your trust trust with certain NPCs and unlock additional types. So Bremer is the one that you'll need to get max trust with for calves to be able to buy them from the vendor. Something to note is that Bremer is really, really hard to find. He is typically found at night at the Hernan Tavern or during the day at the Muckroot Ranch or at his house nearby. However, he is really hard to locate. Like, I've seen multiple reports of him just lurking around town, like in the city square and anything, and I could not for the life of me find him.
Echo Base, this is Rogue 2. I found them. Repeat, I found them.
So alternatively, you could just steal calves from the Muckroot Ranch, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with that. And you should do that anyway for all of these too. But Ibano is the other one. He will sell you goats that he is typically found at the Hernan Tavern or at his ranch as well. And then William for sheep that you would have met during the main story at the Bloomwood Ranch. Now, sheep, hugely important for fleece, like we mentioned earlier in the video, because they will just passively give you fleece once you do have sheep, and you can just steal sheep from the Bloomwood Ranch too, by the way. And then if you max out your trust with Ben, the actual rancher at your camp, you will then unlock pigs. So you can then have pigs on the camp too. Or you could just run around to all of these ranches in the Hernan area and just take them back, you know, because you can register any animal that you do find, whether you steal them or wild goats, things like that. But also you can sell them or butcher them via the other two options when you do bring them up to the ranch. For the most part here, you probably want to put them into your ranch so you can actually level them up and start generating passive resources from them, like the fleece from the sheep or milk or whatever it is that you're actually trying to get, eggs from the chickens, etc. How you actually level them up though, you do need to put food in either the food pit or just on the ground. I found that putting food on the ground works way better. Now, by the way, you don't have to manually like click on each food, take it out, put it down. You can just discard the food. That'll put it on the ground. So if you just discard food one by one by one by one, dump it all on the ground, all of your livestock, you'll just see them like hoard over and eat it. This will level them up significantly faster than putting it in the feeder, though I would always make sure you've got things like flowers and grains, etc. in the feeder. But putting apples, fruits, vegetables, etc. on the ground, grains as well, they will just flock to it and just absolutely consume it, level up way faster. Then you can actually start generating resources from them or butchering them if you do want to butcher them. Now, you can actually get offspring as well if you have two of the same type of animal, but you have both genders. There is a chance that you'll get an offspring. There's no notification for this, but they will just appear there and then level up over time like your other animals would. Farming is one of the other critical parts. Now, you can plant seeds in your crops here that can grow. Apples and grapes are sort of the first ones, but apples is one I would focus on. Realistically, with fruits, it's better just to focus on one specific fruit if you are using it for cooking, because the more of that you have, then you'll be able to just individually use that one. Same with meats, right? It's better just focus on one type for the different cooking types. Now, to get seeds, you can buy them from the guy there, but you can also take them out of the food, like I mentioned, and then plant them. But there are vendors throughout the world, typically the provisioners, that you can get some seeds from when you are out traveling the cities. By the way, as well, for some end-game resources like Skyroot, things like that, you will actually be able to do research that will unlock the ability to extract a seed from them and then plant it at your camp. Same with wild Genseg as well, but that will then allow you to get some of those harder end-game resources, get some of those better crafting and alchemy things as well. Now, if you need the space back, by the way, like say, you know, you've got your apple tree there and you've already taken your apples and you just need that space back to grow something else, you can simply just cut it down with an axe. You'll be able to destroy that tree. That hole will then come back, so you'll be able to plant something back in it. Now, worth noting as well that if you are planting a lot of endgame resources here or just things in general, once you have finished the game and once you have fully upgraded your camp and once you have fully repaired Payloon, you will have the option to move your camp to Payloon. When you do this, you will lose anything that is here at the farming. You'll still keep some of the other stuff like, you know, your ranching, etc., but you will lose the farming and the trees you have planted because you can't take them out of the ground and move them. So do keep that in mind. Don't plant too many endgame resources here. So I want to start with a bit of an explanation of how they actually work, as especially with gloves and boots, this is really confusing as they kind of act like weapons, but they're not. And you're probably actually slotting things in here that don't actually work. So how this works is that even though you can put critical hit rate and attack power on your leather boots or just boots in general and any of your gloves, they only work when you are actively using them as a weapon. So for example, here on these gloves, we have attack power and critical hit rate +2. And then let's just put put on some gloves here, some boots that have critical hit 2 and attack 1. So what we can see here, if we look at our stats on the left-hand side, we're not actually getting any critical hit benefits, and our attack's currently 5. However, if we switch our weapon here to our melee weapon of unarmed, you can see the critical hit rate is now 4 because of the 2 that we're getting from that, and then our attack rating actually went up. However, if we go here and we change this to say no gloves, you'll notice how our damage goes down, same as both of our critical hit rating as well. Now, interestingly, say if we just put these back on, we go back to our two-handed weapon, you can see the drop off there for both of the critical hit rate as well as the attack, though the attack is a little bit less representative because of the weapon we're using. Attack speed works differently, however. Attack speed, even if it is on your gloves or your boots, it will still actually be representative to your overall stats, even when you're not using an unarmed weapon. So here I'm dual wielding my dual wield setup from our Golden Lightning build. With both of our weapons drawn, we're at 15 attack speed, so our attack speed is maxed. Interestingly, if we then change this, say if we just drop this back to something that we were using before, you can see our attack speed drops. So that is different for attack speed. This is also true for movement speed. So if we switch to these Grey Wolf set that I have movement speed on, you can see our movement speed is now 9, and it doesn't matter regardless of whatever build we're using. So attack speed and movement speed are different to critical hit rate as well as attack when you put them on your gloves and your boots. So for weapons, you want to make sure you put critical hit rate and then raw attack onto your weapons directly. Which one would you prefer? Personally, probably critical hit rate once you have upgraded your weapon by a substantial amount, especially the level 3 variants that you can get, but there is still value in the attacks if that's all you can do. Something to note about attack speed as well is that it's actually not that much of a difference. A level 15 attack speed increase is about a 1 second difference in animation speed compared to the level 0 when you're just raw attacking with the basic combo.
Okay.
Another funny one is the shield that also has a weird way of working. There is some misinformation about how the shield actually works as well. So here you can see I have equipped the golden shield that has damage reduction 1.0 and defense 9 on it. So the defense is actually 14, but it has a passive effect of attack speed plus level 2. So here, if we're looking at our setup with my sword put away here and we go just have a look at our weapons, you can see that our attack speed is 9. Our defense is 69. Nice. But we don't actually have, if you look at that left-hand list, that damage reduction increase. So if we draw our weapon here and then we check this menu again, our things are still exactly the same. We don't have that increase. However, what's interesting is if we switch off our shield here to this other shield, you notice how that defense number actually changes. So you don't get the attack speed buff that we're getting here. Say if we just drop to this random sword that doesn't have anything on it, this Sword of the Wolf, you'll notice my attack speed doesn't change. You'll notice that I don't get that additional effect either that I have on this golden shield for that damage reduction. That will only come into play if you draw out that weapon. You'll see here on the left-hand side again, damage reduction 1.0 because the shield is actually equipped. So the defense passive that you're putting on Abyss Gear for a shield will still work if you are solely running a two-handed build. However, any of the other Abyss Gears you're putting on it, like the damage reduction 1.0, things like that, they won't be reflective when you're two-handing, unlike some of the information that's out there that says that all Abyss Gears work. That is incorrect. Same as the passive effect. The passive effect that is on some of these shields, like the attack speed that this one has, will not be reflective if you do have your two-handed sword drawn.
Write that down, write that down!
Now, the same is also true if you are dual wielding. If you are dual wielding, even though you have a sword on your back, always, you'll see I've still got that sword on my back, the defense number does not carry over. So you can see my defense is 55 right there. If I switch back to that, it's 69 because of the 14 increase. So it does not carry over, even though it's on my back. So you won't get any increase from having a shield on your back, but it's not actually equipped. So there's no benefit from having it there or putting anything on it like I mentioned in that video.
Can you repeat the part of this stuff where you said all about the things?
The last one is bows. Now, bows are similar to other weapons in that their passive effects are only active while the bow is active. So while the bow is basically drawn and in its animation of being used. So this is the main bow that I've been using. You can see here I get +3 critical hit while it is active and I'm using it. Same with attack speed. As you notice, when that bow went away, the attack speed buff actually disappeared. There it goes again. So there's no point really in putting any of these buffs onto your bow. I would just be putting raw attack on it, because then it's just increasing the overall damage of the bow while you're actually using the bow, and then not really worrying about any of the other effects that are like attack speed, critical hit rate, etc. Because really you're just going to draw it and want to do as much damage as possible. To continue from that point, if you want to get more of these additional passive benefits, accessories are a great way to do that, as they often do have these passive benefits on them. Some weapons will also give you some secondary stats on them at a slight decrease to whatever their maximum damage in, usually around 4. Depending on your build, these weapons are probably the ones you want to look at. Essentially, you're getting like a free Abyss Core passive effect from the weapon at the cost of like 4 damage, give or take. So that might be beneficial depending on what sort of build you're running. Now, generally, if you're wondering, like, should you go for critical hit rate, attack speed, movement speed, or attack, crit rate is probably one of the better options, except one of the problems that I have with testing anything in Crimson Desert is it's really hard because we don't have actual raw damage numbers or a health bar that's like really easy to manage and replicate over like consistent amount of time, right? You can't really fight a boss that's going to smack you around just for testing all of this stuff over and over again. It does make it quite difficult. But ultimately though, because the increase from 0 to 15 for attack speed is so negligible, stacking critical hit rate is probably the better option. Crafting Abyss gear and the synthesize option are really important to also understand as well. Now, to craft Abyss gear, you will need Abyss cells, which I will tell you the best way to get those in a little bit. But basically, you'll need to buy these core recipes from the 4 main witches. I'll get into where you can find those in a little bit as well. But something to note is that, yes, the obvious like unique effects on your Abyss gears are amazing. Definitely want to use those and stack the effects as well. So if you've got multiple effects that work on an R2 or something like that, you definitely want to put those on the one weapon so you can double up those effects for maximum usage when you do actually lean into those effects. But something else to note is that there's an easy way to upgrade to the higher tiers once you've got the recipes too. So when you do go to all of these witches, buy the core recipes, because then for the attack speed, the attack, all those, you'll actually be able to then just combine the existing ones you have. So any gear that you find out in the world, in all the gear videos you've been watching online, like all of mine, make sure you rip out those Abyss gears, even just the basic like attack speed 1s, 2s, etc. Then combine them to make the higher tier so you can get the additional benefits from just those 1 slots, right? Because if you've got 3 slots on a piece of gear, it's much better to have 3, critical hit level 3s or whatever on that gear than have the level 1s, because you'll just get more value out of that singular slot. But you may have also noticed in the crafting menu the synthesis option. Now, interesting thing about this to note is that you'll notice on the left hand side that it'll have like a percentage chance of what you're going to get. Now, there is, for all 3 different levels, you have a 4% chance of getting a greater Abyss gear. So it's the same for the tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3, right? So there's no actual difference when you are pumping in, say, tier 3 Abyss gears trying to get a greater than tier 1s. So I do recommend for this instance specifically to use tier 1s, because they're just easier to get and you're not actually losing as many resources. However, that 4% chance, you can actually save scum that, right? So if you're just going to continue to try and get these greater Abyss gears, which the greater Abyss gears, by the way, are the ones that have that, say if you find like an attack speed one, it'll be like a level 10 attack speed on that one Abyss gear, or any of these like greater primal banes, etc. They're a 40% increase to your damage for that specific enemy type. Now, the downside to this is that it is a 4% chance, but the positive to this is that you can just save scum that, right? So make a save before you dump your Abyss gear into that 4% chance, and then if you fail, then you just reload that save and just keep doing that over and over again until you get the Abyss gear that you want. But the downside to all of these greater Abyss gears is they do have a durability, so they only last a certain amount of time. So it's not necessarily something you want to invest a ton of resources into and to say spend time save scumming, because you're going to lose that Abyss gear anyway after a percentage of time. But definitely will give you a huge increase to, say, maybe if you're fighting a certain boss or something that is really challenging, you might want to have a couple of these greater Abyss gears that you can specifically slot in for those encounters rather than wasting them on just like general fodder at sanctums, things like that. Now, to actually get Abyss cells and Abyss gear and the likes, there's a couple of locations to think about. So firstly, like the main one that you can go to is actually just to the north of the Witchwoods. There's a location here where you can find those like bushy, like plant Abyss creatures. Now, if you force palm these, they'll die instantly. You'll be able to pick up the Abyss cells and anything else that they drop. However, the best location, in my opinion, is probably Drake's Fall Castle. This is to the south of Payloon. Here you can farm the bismuth ore, as well as abyss cells, as well as abyss gear from these little crab things. They drop all 3 of those. Full credit goes to Gamers Heroes, by the way. I did find this location because of them. So this is a fantastic location because there's a fast travel point here as well. So you can just return to this location after a couple of days have passed when everything is respawned, farm out the ore, the cells, and the gear. So you can then craft your own abyss gear and actually use that bismuth ore as well. So where do you find the 4 witches? Well, there's actually 5, by the way, as they did add an additional one that is right near Hernand Castle, but you can't actually buy anything from them. It's really just an early game location you can go to that unlocks now in chapter 3 that you can actually socket in these abyss gear or take them out from ones that you already have at that point. But the first one is actually part of the main story. She unlocks during chapter 5 during the guest Unbidden Black and White. They will directly take you to her. There's not really much to say here. Just follow the main story at chapter 5 and you'll get there. The Witch of Humility is the next one that you probably run into. They are in the Bahane area of the map that you will come to as part of the main story, but they're like quest is started via a bridge that's collapsed. There's a person that's hanging off the bridge. You'll need to pick them up and then you'll get the quest to actually go and locate where the witch is found. She is found well off into Serpent March on an island in between like all of the major regions. It is quite challenging to get here. It will take a bit of a trek to get there, but there is a fast travel point once you have traveled there. With all of these, by the way, make sure you are buying all of the recipes that they do have, because once you have learnt the recipe, you don't have to come back to this location in the middle of nowhere and actually talk to this witch again, unless you do all the sanctums, which we'll talk about in a little bit. The next one is in Payloon, the Witch of Wisdom. In the Payloon southeast of the Wayward Woods, you'll actually find a witch that is at a handmade shelter that is cold. You'll simply just need to light the torch in front of them. I don't know why they couldn't do this themselves. And then they will go to the main witch's cabin, which is way up in the Silver Wolf Mountain in the north of Payloon. It's on an island here. You'll just need to travel to that island and talk to them there. And then the last is the Witch of Strength, which is found in the Crimson Desert region. Right next to the city of Tommaso, there is a bounty board with a child standing at the front of it. You'll just need to give them a coin, and then you'll get the quest to actually go to their cabin, which is right up in the west of the world's navel in the Crimson Desert. It does take a little bit. This one has an annoying fast travel that's not even close to them, but you can buy the recipes that she does sell. She sells the attack one and a couple of other good ones too that you can pick up. Now, something to note is that all these witches will give you the Sanctum quest to go and clear out all the Sanctums plus the ones that have the bosses. By the way, doing this will give you a unique cutscene with a particular NPC and a unique cloak that you can get, but ultimately it's not totally worth it, so I wouldn't be rushing out through those Sanctums. But one thing to note is that every Sanctum does have a hidden chest, which is the real value of actually doing those Sanctums. So firstly, I'll start with my favorite and a genuine way to make a lot of the lengthy castles and like area clears just so much easier. That's starting your own party. Once you've unlocked Oongka and Damiane, you can press up on the D-pad to switch to them at any time, GTA style, but you can also hit summon, then select the gather option on the right hand side, and now you've got your own adventuring party. But what can you actually do with them? Well, essentially anything that you would be doing on your own in the open world. They can follow you around, they'll use their own gear, they'll ride their own horses, they can fight with you, and it does make those large encounters so much easier as they pull some of that aggro away from you, and they just generally defeat enemies, which is just fantastic when you've got to defeat, 50, 60 certain enemies just to clear one location. You can also quickly switch between them while the group is active without loading screens or anything. You can just bounce between them and like play as whoever you like, and you can all just kind of travel around together. One of the downsides, however, is that you can't do certain quests while in this mode. Sometimes when you arrive at a certain quest location, it'll say like, this is Cliff's story. You'll have to disband the group to be able to actually progress the story. However, it's just a good thing to have active when you are out exploring the world once you have unlocked Oongka and Damiane. By the way, Oongka unlocks in chapter 7 and Damiane unlocks initially in chapter 3, but realistically in chapter 8 once you've done a few things there, as she does disappear for a while. But you will have to do a side quest to actually unlock Oongka once you have played as him initially, and then you've got the full group that you can traverse together. Did you know every major city has a bell tower, and if you climb that tower, you can ring it. It'll clear the map fog in the surrounding area. Well, if you want the map fog cleared, that is, because I personally don't think you should, because what this does, obviously, is it does clear the map. It'll also mark all the locations on the map in that sort of area. Not all of them, like the hidden locations won't be there, but just like the major ones. The downside to doing this is that you have no idea where you have been and haven't been. really you can kind of tell if there are fast travel points or not fast travel points, but like generally you just like don't have that fog progression of sort of you actually exploring and seeing the area. I would recommend only to do this once you've actually explored an area pretty extensively, like once you've been all around the Hernand region, then ring the bell tower. Same with all the other regions, but just generally I prefer to explore myself rather than just have the whole map cleared, because then I've just got no idea where I've actually been and I'm not really clearing anything because I don't remember. You probably know this one, but I'm going to mention it anyway, and that is waterfalls. Almost every waterfall in the game, literally every waterfall, will have a hidden cave behind it. You can actually find where these caves are by the little rock pillars that are sitting sort of on the edge of some of these waterfalls. At this location, if you use the stab ability, you will stab through the waterfall and often find yourself a unique piece of gear plus a refined Palmer pill, which will revive you to 100% health when you do go down, and usually a couple of other goodies depending on the size of that cave. So anytime you do see a waterfall, make sure you are checking to see if there is actually a way you can get into it. A massive tip for puzzles is how effective focus light can be. So we all know that you can use blinding flash to highlight potential abyss artifacts and fast travel points on the map. However, if you focus that light, there's a few things you can do. You can set vines, wooden buildings on fire to just remove them from the world, like especially the vines. You can actually use it to like get through certain areas. And you can also use this to destroy flying enemies. Very beneficial because there's like no other really way to do this in an easy manner. You can also cook your food on the ground. Just make sure to desummon your pet first so they don't try and eat the raw food on the ground, which can be a little bit annoying. But you wouldn't really want to do this anyway because you don't get the same benefits as you would from, say, cooking and combining different ingredients. But generally speaking, focus light and using that ability will really help you succeed, especially on those puzzles where the game tells you to light an arrow on fire. Don't do that. Just use the blinding flash and the focus light ability. It does the exact same thing, and it's so much easier to do. Also, the blinding flash finisher is like a crazy good skill as well if you do want to use that, because blinding flash does stun the enemies, and the finisher you can just follow up for free damage, so really beneficial as well. So the recent patch that went live removed the key item status for some things, so you can actually get rid of them out of your inventory once you've completed the quest to clear that inventory slot. Very beneficial, but they also increased the max inventory size, by the way. That's not the main reason I wanted to mention inventory, though. There's actually two other things I wanted to bring to your attention. Firstly, if your inventory is getting really cluttered because you have so many items, like I mean there's over 230 slots, you can use the group function to group like items together. This just makes the inventory management so much easier when all of your food is grouped together, all of your elixirs is grouped together, all of your insects, etc. Because then you're not looking through and scrolling through a giant list of things to see, what did I just pick up? Like, where are my things? Where's my food? Where's my this? It just makes that management a lot easier. Now, by the way, as well, when you are in your inventory and you're looking at your inventory, there are a couple of items that you can find that will give you permanent buffs if you just consume them. One, it'll free up that inventory slot, which is great anyway, but they'll just give you a permanent buff. Like a couple that I just had lurking in my inventory was a fighting spirit that gave me additional 20 max spirit, and then a dark red goblet that gave me 40 max stamina. So basically just like a free skill upgrade for like increasing your spirit, stamina, etc. by 1. You just get these from these items from some of these quests. Just really beneficial. Like definitely check if you have any of these in your inventory. Another thing that they fixed in that patch, which I am so glad that they did, is private storage. So now your supply chest is your private storage. So here you can withdraw items, but you can also put items in. Just insane benefit here, because like, yes, the size isn't great. Like it's only 230 slots, but that was what your inventory was previously anyway. So like it's just basically doubled the amount of storage you can have. But you know, any weapons you pick up, anything that you just want to keep but don't want to carry, because there's so much stuff like this in the game, you'll be able to put it into your private storage and then you've got it there. But something to note is that materials you will need to carry with you if you do want to actually use them for, you know, your crafting and things like that. But basically, if you're just picking up stuff that you just don't want to sell, you can store it there. Great way to keep like old unique weapons or like any abyss gear that you don't want to have to carry with you, as there's tons of those like abyss gears that you might just be ripping out of weapons or just finding and carrying. You can store them there, and a bunch of other things as well. Just generally a huge tip is that to use that private storage to store stuff. Now, something to note is that if you haven't got your camp, which is where the private storage would be, before that point, there is actually a private storage and a bed in the temporary lodgings to the top of Hernand, where you initially sort of hit Hernand. There's actually a camp there that'll have a private storage chest. If you haven't got the camp yet, once you do, it'll just be moved to the camp and you'll be able to use it from there. Generally, a good tip tip is to save often, create multiple saves at different points, you know, if in case you need to return to things or something happens, bugs, etc. However, there's something really sneaky you can do with those saves right now, by the way. I don't know if they're going to change this, but they probably will. So if you have seen any of the gambling dens, like there is the one in Hernand, it is only a 15 silver buy-in, but there's one in the Bayen, I don't know if I'm saying that name right, town, that has 150 silver buy-in. Now what you can do here is save before sitting down at the table, then sit down at the table, play, go all in, see if you win. If you do win, you just immediately leave the table, take all of that silver with you, save the game again, then reload that save and repeat. Because when you reload that save, it'll reload new people at the table. You can just sit back down again, go all in, see if you win. If you win, leave the table, save, etc., rinse, repeat. It's essentially like a free way to make a absolute ton of money depending on how many people are sitting at the table and if you win. But if you lose, you just get up from the table and just load that previous save. Don't save again, just load that save before you lost and you'll still have all of that silver and just a brand new people on the table to do it all again. So generally great way to just earn an absolute insane amount of money, which they probably may patch out. So do this now before they do that. Now the Abyss has a lot of benefits that you probably don't realize. The Abyss, firstly, is, you know, that sky islands that you see above the world. Now, a couple of things to note about this is that you can use the Abyss fast travel points to get around the map a little bit easier. Say, for example, if you have been to an Abyss location above the world, but you haven't been there below the world, you can still fast travel up there and then just jump off, land back down on the world, find wherever you're trying to go to. If you accidentally fall off the Abyss, there is now a stop option if you press in the left analog stick or whatever it is on PC that will actually cling you to the Abyss, and then on the right hand side you'll see an escape option and you can press that so that you'll just respawn back on the Abyss. This wasn't in like the review build, so it was super annoying if you like fell off the Abyss and you just hit the ground. Really annoying to do, but ultimately like the Abyss is something you should be doing because there's a ton of Abyss artifacts up here. There's a lot of other uniques, like we're going to touch on some in a little bit like later in this video, but there is also the elemental attacks. All that stuff unlocks from doing these Abyss. So even if the main quest takes you up there and then once you've done that step and you just leave, you should stay up there and actually do the puzzles and like follow the sky bridge and see where the things take you. A quick one, you'll find grindstones and anvils in the world. Clicking on them will reinforce your weapons and armor. This will give you a +5 attack or +5 defense for a period of time. Really beneficial to do before you do any of those hard chapter bosses or any other bosses in the game because it's just free damage and free defense. Can't go wrong there. If you have issues with the camera and it sort of bothers you as it does have a little bit of like lag or like sort of slow effect, you can actually tweak this with the camera acceleration setting in the settings and enter input for either controller or mouse. Now what this does is initially this is on 70. I recommend to put this to 100. This will make the camera feel much snappier. You won't get that sort of lag where it drags that little bit after you've even stopped moving it. If you put this all the way to 0, you'll see exactly what I mean because it feels awful to play this game at 0. I don't get motion sick when I play games, but I turned this to 0 and even just getting this little bit of footage, I was like, whoa man, this feels a little trippy. But setting it to 100 will just make the camera feel a little bit snappier, easier to pick up items generally. They actually did change that a little bit in the recent patch too, just to make it a bit easier anyway. But changes to 100, it will make a slight difference just to your overall maneuverability and camera usage. Pets are quite overpowered. Now, the pet companions can pick up things for you in the world, but whatever they don't pick up, that will just end up in your supply chest, by the way. So when you clear out those massive encounters and everyone despawns, anything that they dropped, they'll just go into your supply chest. So make sure you check that supply chest regularly. But the pets will pick things up for you, whether you're out farming materials or just fighting enemies. And don't forget, you can actually dress them up. The first one that you'll find is in the Poran village. There is actually a vendor here where you can dress up your pets and make them look cute as hell, by the way. To get pets, you will need to pet them multiple times and across multiple days because you'll get 5 per, and I think it caps at like 25 per day you can get. And then if you also drop food for them, you'll get some trust from that. You'll need to do this for multiple days in a row on the same pet. Once that hits 100, you'll be able to take them in and then they'll become your pet. You can summon them, dress them up, etc. You may have seen in a lot of the trailers and just generally some of the footage that's been going around that there are a lot of exotic mounts in the game, like bears and lions and all sorts of other things. By the way, if you want to get yourself a bear, there is actually a spawn point very close to the Greymane camp, just sort of to the southish of it. There's a bear that'll spawn there occasionally. Now, to get this bear and most of the bears, you will need to attack them for a period of time. They do deal quite a lot of damage, so do be careful. Once you have damaged them enough, they will sort of pause for a second in like a stun animation, and a ride will appear, then you'll be able to ride the bear around and like attack with its claws and do various other things. The downside to the bear and also the lion, by the way, you can get the lion at the circus in the Damiane castle, but just generally a lot of these exotic mounts, they are all temporary, so you can't actually have them as like essentially like your horse where you can summon them at any given time. This is kind of a disappointment. I do hope that Pearl Abyss do change this, as I feel like it was a little misleading in the trailers and such before launch. But if you do fight enemies in combat that have their own mounts, you can knock them off that or damage it and take it, like the black bear's bear and various other ones as well. So you can even use them in combat too, but just wanted to point that out. One of the problems with bounties is that you will have to travel a very long way sometimes to bring a bounty back to the jail. Now, a massive tip for this is don't just carry the bounty, right? Because anytime you want to get off your horse or you might get attacked or you want to do something, you're just carrying a bounty. You can actually put the bounty on your horse by pressing like the L1, like the lantern button, and then unloading them onto your horse. So now essentially you can just travel back at your own pace, like you were exploring essentially. If you need to stop, take a breath, like get off the horse and, you know, check something, do something, you can do that. The horse will stay there with the bounty on them. Don't summon the horse though. Like if you get too far away and summon the horse, you'll lose your bounty, but make sure you do run back. But it just makes that process a little bit easier. Still feels like you're exploring and out enjoying the world and not just like immediately sprinting back to the jail cell just to drop off the bounty. By the way, in case you didn't know, you can get free Abyss artifacts just by fighting enemies. There is a little progress bar to the left of your compass, that yellow bar. When this does completely fill up, you will get a free Abyss artifact. And this is partly why doing a lot of those clearing, especially the sanctums, is quite beneficial. Now, generally, by the way, just something else to mention about the sanctums, every single sanctum has a hidden chest somewhere in that sanctum. So whenever you go to these sanctums to clear them out for the witches, always make sure you know, cleanse the sanctum like they want, but there is always a hidden chest somewhere in that sanctum. So grab that, get the gear. It's not always going to be beneficial and like really insane gear, but you know, it's well worth doing. Also, I know people are going to ask about some of the combat footage in this video on the right-hand side. How you can like see the combo thing. That is from an Abyss gear that comes from a story boss in chapter 9. So that's the answer for you there. It's called Relentless, really actually OP Abyss gear. But anyway, moving on. 2 movement tips for you. Firstly, Axiom Force, like the 3rd level of that, will allow you to vault yourself up onto cliffs, ledges, etc. It's essentially like the precision jump, except longer. It does cost 200 stamina, so you will need some stamina upgrades for this, but generally beneficial to help you get around, especially in the Abyss, to skip some certain sections when you're just like climbing around and have to like jump on all the platforms, which I find really annoying. Also, just when you are climbing mountains and just generally exploring, if you jump and then force palm down 3 times, you'll get yourself so much more height without using any stamina, and from there you can glide or you can attach yourself to a cliff, etc. Just a great way to get better movement around the world without having to just manually climb up things all the time. Now, other than Abyss gear, elemental attacks are one of the best ways to increase your overall damage and effectiveness in combat, but they do require a bit to unlock. They don't all unlock straight away either, so the first one that you'll be able to get actually starts in the Institute after chapter 4 when you go there as part of the story. So when you go up to the Abyss as part of that mission, you can actually stay up there and do some Abyss puzzles rather than leave and go continue the main story. And by doing so, you'll need to complete multiple Abyss islands, and then at the end of one of them, you'll actually unlock the lightning skill ability. Now this triggers with R2 and circle, and like you basically like spawn out these like electric tentacles that like stun people, and then on top of that you can learn the imbue skill, and then from there you can actually imbue your weapons with those elemental effects, obviously starting with lightning as that's the one that you just unlocked. Like you can put it on your turning slash ability for extra damage, and it's actually really beneficial to do so. It has like a nice elemental effect around the attack, additional damage, can't go wrong there. But to get this skill, essentially if you travel to the Abyss where you were at chapter 4, so like directly above the Institute, if you fast travel to that Abyss point, you'll need to clear the Secret Garden and the Vault of Vengeance before getting to the Courtyard of Precision. Now the Secret Garden is pretty easy to clear. You essentially just need to grab the missing power socket from like the very back corner and then plug that into the laser. The force current ability will help you do this a little bit quicker without having to actually force palm the power socket itself. Then you need to move the lasers into position to open the door. They both have to be moved and finagled around. I found this a little frustrating to get the positioning right, but you essentially need to hit both of these lasers in these positions that I'm showing, and then you will open the door and be able to travel through to the next location, being the Vault Bolt of Vengeance. Don't forget to pick up your Abyss artifact, by the way. Now, here you can get a golden sword, which is pretty cool, but this one will actually send you to the final one. Now, the puzzles here are actually not too bad. You essentially just need to open the door with the Abyss cells first, and then you'll need to use the focused shot skill, which will allow you to shoot multiple of these targets at once, because you need to shoot them all at once, and then that will progress you through. You'll open the vault. In the vault, you'll find the golden sword and a bunch of other stuff and chests to actually open, and then if you drop down through the floor, you'll be able to make your way through to the Courtyard of Precision, which is essentially the same thing as the vault. You'll need to shoot the targets using focus shot and shoot them all at once. This is quite tricky though. Like, the last ones you have to do are actually in the center, and you have to use the glide to like glide up and hit them while you're gliding. Really pain to do. Like, this took me like 20 minutes to do, I think. Like, I found this quite frustrating, but once you have done it and you've completed this location, you will unlock the lightning skill and get your first elemental attack and actually be able to imbue it onto your weapons as well. A minor one, but any crates and like barrels, things you see around, you can actually smash them. There's almost always something in them, very Zelda-like in that way, but you'll be able to smash them and just like grab stuff. You do this in towns, that will still be stealing, so you know you will be doing some vandalism that people won't like, but it'll still be stealing as well. But if you are just out exploring and you see these, just smash them and pick up whatever is in them. Your pet will pick these up sometimes too. I've saved maybe the most important one for last, which maybe is a bad thing because people might not make it this far in the video, but the NPC trust system is actually really important, and it took me a long time to figure this out. So NPCs have trust the same as pets do, which, you know, when you max that out, you get a pet, but here you actually get multiple things. So if you max out a vendor's trust level, they will always have a unique inventory item that unlocks when you hit trust level 100 with them, and sometimes something else. So how you do this typically is first by greeting them. This gives you 5 trust, and then the main way is just gifting them stuff. There's no daily cooldown here like there is with pets. You just essentially need to give them stuff. You'll get 10 trust per thing, and then that will max out to 100. Now, most of these NPCs will have something different that you have to give them. For the most part here, like copper pouches, everyone will take those, but the other vendors, like, you've really got to find what works for them and what they'll take. Basically, all equipment vendors for some reason will take hide. I don't know why, but they will, so that's super easy to fill out. And equipment vendors are a great one to do so because they'll have often a hidden shield or piece of armor or something that will unlock at trust level 100, but they will also have like a slip of paper that you can buy and consume in your inventory that will then have their entire inventory available for you at your camp. So you won't have to travel specifically to those equipment vendors in the towns anymore if you do this. Now, another thing as well, like I did this in the Payloon area with the equipment vendor there, and he gave me a slip of paper that told me about a legendary white moose in the area. So there's always stuff that you can get from doing so, and I do recommend to do this. It's a good reason to keep your copper pouches because you only get a couple of copper from them anyway, so you may as well do this to max out the trust. And just generally, if you're picking up a whole bunch of random stuff, like, you'll then be able to search in the gifting screen and see what they'll actually take and see maxing those out and see what you actually get from it. Damiane and Oongka are 2 extra playable characters. Now, Damiane initially unlocks in chapter 3 and then she disappears until chapter 8, whilst Oongka unlocks in chapter 7, and then you'll have to do a side quest to permanently unlock him. It is highly important that you invest some time into both of these characters when they are unlocked, because you'll be locked into playing them by the story for a certain period of time that has a lot of challenging boss encounters. So to help you with those boss encounters, here is a guide for each of them, starting with Damiane. So for Damiane, sure, you can move all your best Abyss gear to her, and I could be like, here's the most OP Damiane build, as long as you move all of your crap off cliff and put it on her, but I didn't want to do that because you're not going to do that, firstly. So I focused on Abyss gear and skills, etc., that aren't necessarily like best in the game, because Cliff's already going to be using those, and I will have a video all of that best in slot stuff for Cliff later on, by the way. Now, instead, we're focusing on the next best options while leading into things that make her special. So Damiane has a lot of amazing shield abilities, but the downside to all of them is that while her shield is active doing something, she can't use the shield to block in combat or use it for anything else. And it is a little buggy right now in that, like, if you're sending your shield out to be a watcher, for example, where it will just like hover around and attack enemies around you, You can't dual wield either. Even if you switch off the shield or you didn't have one equipped in the first place, you'll just do like the one-handed rapier attack. And even though it just has 2 rapiers in your hand, it's just a little buggy. I think they'll fix this in patches, so things might change a little bit. So you can't dual wield when the shield, and it just can be a little bit finicky. So what I've decided to do is two-hand a weapon and use a two-handed weapon, and then use all of these shield abilities alongside it, because then for some reason with a two-handed you can still block and do all of your main combos and everything. It doesn't like get a little finicky like the one-handed rapier or even dual wielding does. Damiane's heavy attack and her turning slash abilities are a smite ability that like calls down the spear of light to damage enemies. And while these combos and moves are pretty good on Cliff, like some of the best that there is, I found that Damiane's is a little weaker. And yes, the range here is good, but personally I've decided to lean into the sword flurry combo, as I think it flows nicely with just the R1. So basically if you hold R1, you'll do your normal like light attack combos, and then you just press X and you'll do the sword flurry. Now I've combined Abyss gear that uses this sword flurry, so you can just get this really nice flow of just stabbing with this spear and then combining it with the Abyss gear benefits that you get from that. And we'll cover where you get all that Abyss gear in a little bit, but basically we're doing that and also leaning into the elemental effects. So we're talking ice and fire, wind, etc. I originally was going to do a lot of wind for Damiane, as I really like the idea of like using the wind and like the sky step to get yourself in the air, and then like using the rifle or something to like shoot down and like imbuing it with elements. Really fun idea, but the wind is just so weak, so I ended up leaning a lot more into ice, because if you imbue your shield toss with ice, it'll immediately freeze the enemies and basically just like one-shot them for most enemies except for like the giant like ogres and stuff. So it's really an incredible just like area clear that you can do. But let's talk about those best skills. So something to note is that HP, stamina, and spirit investments from Cliff do count for all 3 characters, by the way, so you don't have to invest in those individually, but you will need to invest in some of the specific Damiane skills. Firstly, like sword flurry, by the way, we already touched on that. That's the R1 and X ability, or R1 and A on Xbox, or RB, whatever it is. So you can get the sword flurry. Now with the two-handed variant of sword flurry, you don't get that like dodge step that you get with the one-handed rapier, but it's still incredible when you combine it with Abyss gear. Now there's a lot of specific shield skills that Damiane has, one of them being like the imbue elements to shield, which you should definitely be getting for shield toss and maximizing your shield toss. But the shield watcher and blade sentinel are also really good. Personally, I always lean shield watcher. So blade sentinel will send out your shield to essentially act as like a spinning disc on a specific location. If the enemies move out of that location, then it's just doing nothing. So shield watcher is great because it follows you around as basically a sentinel and will just attack anything around you and like deal like this laser damage to them. Really great ability that you can just get some free damage, like if you're not using your shield, because you're not with a two-handed weapon, right? So you can just have your shield hover around you and just deal damage that way. Sky step is also fun for some movement for Damiane, by the way, as you can like build a platform that you can use to like hover above, which is great because she has way less like vertical maneuverability than Cliff. And then imbue elements and just the elemental skills in general are also fantastic. At least invest into like rank 3 of imbue elements so you can imbue your shield toss. That is the key one that I would recommend focusing on. So then you can add ice to freeze enemies, you could add fire to set them on fire, you could add electricity so you can like stun them, like just fantastic to use. Obviously you can imbue your turning slash and your ranged attacks as well, but like the shield toss is the one that I focused on most with Damiane, as I think it's the strongest. So for Abyss gear, we've got a few things to focus on. The main kicker is the Frost Hail Abyss gear, which will imbue ice anytime you imbue your element. Just add these additional ice like effects around you so you can freeze more enemies, deal more damage. This comes from the White Horn boss in Payloon to the west of Payloon. There's a small village here that'll initially give you this quest that you'll need to go and then defeat the big Yeti. And then on the two-handed weapon, I'm using Wind Slash, which you get from the main story, chapter 2. Everyone's probably got that by now. The Dark Crescent is the first R1 and X ability that we're using. This comes from the Antumbra Spear boss at the Sanctum of Solace. This is a really hard fight, so, you know, be prepared for that. Definitely take Cliff if you are doing that fight initially. The Hound's Claw is another R1 ability we're using. Fantastic, as it adds that like sweep AoE around you that hits all the enemies around you, which is fantastic for clearing out camps and everything like that. This comes from the Hound two-handed weapon. The quest is called Where Land Meets Sky, and it does start at the church in Hernan. Pretty early in the game you can unlock this quest. Essentially you just need to follow that quest line. At the end you'll have a boss. Defeat that boss, you'll get the Hound two-handed sword. Ancient Retribution comes from the Princess, the Ancient at the Spire of the Ringing Truth in Payloon. This boss, really, really hard. So like, you know, no shame in like saving this for much later in the game, because that spire and actually beating that boss took me forever. So definitely be prepared for a really tough fight. But if you beat that boss, you'll be able to get this Ancient Retribution, be able to put it onto your spear as well. So you've got 3 effects that trigger with that R1X, and then that Wind Slash with your R1 as well. There are other R1 abilities you could change to as well, but we just wanted to focus on a bit of the early game here. Otherwise, we're mostly just stacking passives and like whatever is like free for you, honestly. If you want more Abyss gear advice, do check out this video right here as I go in detail about what works where and like how Abyss gear works. So for the armor that I'm wearing here, the Light of the Battlefield, most of this is just cosmetic, right? You don't have to go and get this armor. It's essentially just to look cool. You can just put all of this stuff in any armor, any two-handed weapon that you like. But the Light of the Battlefield helm is found in the center area of this huge rock that you'll see to the north of the sea in Crimson Desert on the map. There is an Abyss Crescent on top of that rock, by the way, so you can fast travel back there if you ever need to go back, but that's where you get the helm. The Light of the Battlefield armor is located at the Hal Sand Camp, which is to the north of the M in Crimson Desert. Now, this area is covered in a sandstorm when you get here until you beat the roaming boss. Highly recommend to beat that boss. They are a little buggy for me, as you know how these roaming bosses, like you get them down to like one of their health bars and they disappear. You have to go and fight them again to get your second health bar. For some reason, every time he would disappear and then land a different location, when I went and found him, he had his second health bar again. It was really annoying, but just make sure that you do beat them, as it will make finding the armor in that camp just so much easier. Light of the Battlefield gloves is located inside Varnia near the road curve going upwards. You essentially just need to find this like broken sewer crate, jump down there, and you'll be able to find the treasure chest in there. And while you are there, by the way, the larger waterfall at the bottom of Varnia is where you will find the cloak. You'll just need to use the stab technique as you always do with these waterfalls. And inside that you'll find the cloak, and then the boots is found near this location too, in the Trader's Expanse area. There's a desert shipwreck here, and on the second level of that shipwreck is where you'll find the boots. If you want to get the matching Shield of Radiance, by the way, it's also found nearby, just further south of the Trader's Expanse. There is like a hole in the ground here that you'll need to jump down, and make sure that you deploy your shield and glide down, and don't just faceplant like I did. But inside this location is where you'll find the Shield of Radiance. And then if you're wondering about the spear I'm using, it's the Golden Vanguard from the main story chapter 8 boss that you'll get just by beating them. Before we get too deep into this build guide, I do want to mention one thing that's really critical for Oongka, and that is actually getting his jetpack. So in order to get his jetpack, you will need to do a specific quest that will give you the fire breathing pack, which starts in Payloon, but will send you to the Cuckoo guys. Essentially here, what you'll need to do is craft yourself the jetpack. In order to do that, you'll need to craft a Cuckoo pot, which just requires timber and ore. Then you'll need a backpack. Now, the easiest way to get one of these is just to kick someone that's wearing a backpack and take their backpack. There is actually someone like nearby to the Cuckoo Pot people that is always having a backpack, like a big troll peddler that you can grab from him. And then once you've got that, you'll be able to craft the Oongka jetpack and then equip it on him. And that's actually like his glide ability, essentially. The other thing to note about this is that there is a skill called vertical flight, which does read that if you press L3 in to take off from the ground or ascend vertically while airborne, this actually works even though you won't have the skill unlocked. Like, I don't even know how you unlock this, because you can't just pick up the skill. You have to like observe learn it. No idea where that happens, by the way. If you do know where that happens, do put it in the comments. But you essentially can just do this even without the skill. So just want to keep that in mind, because it's a really incredible vertical ability, and just overall it makes Oongka's movement and playing as him just so much better, because you can essentially just fly literally anywhere you want. So it's really valuable to have. But moving on to the actual build. So Oongka's most unique feature is his ability to use two-handed weapon in his primary weapon slot, which is unique, but then also use his secondary two-handed weapon also as part of certain attacks when you have the right upgrades. So essentially here, the thing to note is that even though you can have a two-handed weapon equipped in both slots, primary and secondary, if you're going to use a two-handed weapon, there are specific ones that Oongka can slot into his primary weapon, and those are the ones you want to use because they do have quicker attack animations than like the two-handing secondary slot weapon. So that is something to keep in in mind. Now, another unique part of Oongka's kit is the fact that he can rage. So by focusing and then pressing R1 or RB or whatever, you'll then be able to enter rage, which gives him like a hyper armor state. So it's much harder for him to get stunned out of attack. So you can essentially just keep wailing on things, which is really important to have. And it's really because of this and also a few of Oongka's skills that we'll get into that I really grew to actually like Oongka. Because of the vertical flight ability, you can really move yourself around very easily in the world. It's easy to get to quests and do things. And then he's got some incredible skills that allow him to like dual wield two-handed weapons and just deal an insane amount of damage with very little effort overall. And I do want to just point out, same as I did with my Damiane video, that yes, this is a fantastic, one of the best builds for Oongka, etc., but I'm not going to use stuff that is like best in slot for Cliff and like best in the game, because that stuff you're going to have on Cliff, right? So you're not going to be using it here, but we are going to use some really incredible stuff. But the really benefit with Oongka is that you can get away with using kind of like very little things, and he's just still really exceptional to use and just fun to play. I actually had a lot of fun just playing as him casually compared to Damiane, that I felt like I had to really force myself to have fun as playing as her. But no shade to her, she's great, but Oongka's definitely my favorite of these two. All right, so best skills for Oongka. Now, worth mentioning is that stamina, HP, and spirit investments in Cliff all carry over to all three characters, but stamina is way more important on Oongka than the other two, because even though it is a really important stat, a lot of his heavier attacks and like using, say, the heavy attack or any of the unique abilities will use a ton of stamina for Oongka. And obviously when you put those abyss gears, those unique ones, they do increase the amount of stamina that attacks use, but you need to balance that much more carefully with Oongka because of how much stamina he does actually use. You go through it very, very quickly. The main skill that you want to focus on with Oongka is in the armed combat. It's actually the fourth skill here. It's called dual wielding mastery. This allows you to wield two-handed weapons with a single hand, and equipping a great hammer in your secondary will also increase the damage of rampage and raging light. Those are the two skills that we're focusing on here for this build, and that you should focus on with Oongka. Rampage is his heavy attack where you like just slam down your two-handed weapon. Now with dual wielding mastery, that will be both weapons. You'll slam one and then slam the other. We are then buffing that further with an abyss gear that we'll get to. And then raging lightning is the second one. So this will spin you around essentially as Oongka, like a whirlwind attack. And when you have the dual wielding mastery, you will spin with both of the weapons in your hands. And then we're buffing that even further with an abyss gear as well. So these are the two main skills that you'll use, other than just your basic light attack combos when you need to replenish your stamina. And then on top of that, when you really just need to dump a ton of damage into an area, we will use Quaking Fury, which is his version of Turning Slash. And then you can imbue that with the fire element like we are here, so that you get an additional benefit on top of that because we have unlocked the fire elemental stuff. All right, so where to get the abyss gear for this build? We'll start with the stuff that's on our armor. So the volcanic eruption, which is one of the imbue fire abyss gear that you can get. This comes from either the Letter of Silence quest in the Demonus region, or you can just go straight to the Twilight Grotto cave to the east of Demonus, where you can just grab this without, even just doing this quest. You can just go and pick it up from that waterfall cave. Make sure you stab into the cave, as you always do. You'll be able to grab it from there. Now, the Flames of Judgment, which is another imbue fire element that you can get. This comes from the Eclipsed Soulless Plate gloves at the end of chapter 8 of the main story. These gloves are actually for Oongka, by the way, but this is already on them. So I think fire really works for Oongka, and that's sort of why we've lent into it with a little bit of this build. But the main two that we're using, really, it's just these two that are going to be on your primary two-handed weapon. Firstly, it's Hound's Claw. So with the R1 and X, which is our Raging Lightning that's spinning, essentially this gives you another spin on top of that that is wider and like fully focused around you, which already the spin is, and deals way more damage on top of that. So it's just further enhancing your Raging Lightning, and it just fits really well into this build to give you more damage, give you more AoE. And because of the way Raging Lightning works, you can just hold down R1 and X and just spin to win for days until you run out of stamina, essentially. So that's partly why on our weapon as well, we've got some of those stamina siphon abyss gears, just to give us a bit of extra stamina back when we are in combat. This is found on a weapon called Hound, which comes from a quest called Where Land Meets Sky, which starts at the church in Herned. Essentially, you just need to follow this quest line. I did cover this extensively in another video all about the best weapons in the game, so we'll link that for you here if you do want to go and watch that. The Shadow Claw, which is our ability that we're using just on our default R2, so on your heavy attack, this then further enhances that, right? Because you've got the dual wielding mastery, so you've got 2 hits for the price of 1 when you do use your rampage, your heavy attack. And then this gives you a claw effect on top of that, which will give you an additional claw effect when you do the finisher for your heavy combo as well. So just an incredible attack to use to, like, there's a couple of bosses you can almost stun lock for a period of time in just like spamming this attack. I did it with Merrick at one point. Now, this comes from the Black Fang boss. This is started from a quest called the Legendary Wolf, which is from House Celeste in the Hernand region. You can talk to an NPC here and like start this quest, but ultimately you don't even need to do the quest. I actually just stumbled across the Black Fang. It is found at the Howling Hollow in North Hernand. This is also where you find the Silver Fang, by the way, for the mount version that you can get, like the wolf mount. But essentially you need to go here, beat the roaming boss, and then you'll be able to get this Abyss gear specifically and be able to put it on any of your gear. On my two-handed weapon, on my Great Hammer, I am using Ground Surge, which is like the magma effect that just shoot out when I use my Quaking Fury. This is mostly just for like the fire aesthetic, and it fits the build. It does come from a boss in chapter 7 of the main story, but ultimately here we're mostly just two-handing our primary. We're never really switching to that secondary weapon unless we want that extra bit of damage. The one thing to note again that I will reiterate here is that yes, like while you're in those animations for Raging Lightning and Rampage, you have both the weapons in your hand, you will only get the Abyss gear buffs and stats from the primary weapon. The things that are in your secondary hand do not carry over. So whether that be attack speed, critical hit rate, the ground surge effect, whatever it is, I've tested this and it doesn't carry over. I do hope they change that, maybe tweak it a little bit, because it would be nice to get both effects. Maybe that's a little overpowered because it is kind of overpowered, but I just wanted to point that out. So don't dump everything on that secondary weapon because you won't get anything for it when you're actually using your primary weapon. And other than that, for Abyss gear, really it's just like up to you. I will link you to my Abyss gear video right here if you want to know specifics around attack speed, movement speed, critical hit rate, all that stuff. That'll give you all the details you need for that. But there is more to go, and that is the Valor Trend armor, which is the armor you see me wearing in this video. That is mostly just for looks because, like, let's be real, it does look very cool. It's a great looking armor, and it is a real pain in the ass to get, unfortunately.
Oh, come on! You gotta admit this is cool!
So ultimately here, you can wear any armor, right? Like all this Abyss gear, you can just dump on any weapons, anything like that. Doesn't matter that much, but I'll go through the armor and the weapons as well of where to get them. But the armor itself, it will take you forever to get. Now, the quest starts from an NPC that stands out the front of the Lion Crest Manor, but it only appears when I walked past. Like, this quest wasn't on my map or anything. I was just in the area and it just like popped up when this I walked past this NPC. So whether this quest is available to you right now in the game or becomes available to you later, you'll only know if you go to the Lion Crest Manor and see this NPC standing there. But I will show you here, like you can see that I've completed a whole lot of quests in the Hernand region. You will definitely need to complete a lot of these quests for this to appear, as it does seem tied a little bit to that region progress. So do keep that in mind, that you will need to progress the region quite a lot before this quest appears. Exactly what triggers it, who knows, right? We're still figuring that stuff out. But ultimately, you just need to follow this quest. You'll need to go and beat a legendary animal. And then after you have done that, there'll be a chest in the room of the NPC that sends you to do that. That'll have the full set of Valor Trend armor. The entire set is found right there. So you can just go equip it all. Happy days. And for the rune engraved rock, which is the two-handed weapon that you can see on my back, the secondary slot weapon, this comes from the Cube Walker boss at the Southern Quarry, which is part of the Felix Estate, like quest line in the Hernand region. So you can get this pretty early. Obviously, you can just use whatever two-handed weapon in your secondary slot. Doesn't matter as long as it's a great hammer, so you get those extra benefits. And then in your primary weapon slot, I am using the Split Tooth Great Axe, which comes from the White Bear of the High Mountains quest. Now, this is in the Payloon area at Fort Askland. I believe this will unlock when you do get access to Payloon in Chapter 7. And then after that point, go there, beat that boss, and then you'll be able to get the Split Tooth Axe that we're using here as well. Firstly, I want to start with how to get more powerful, but more generally, how to increase your HP, stamina, and spirit. As you'll notice at a certain point around 10, you won't be able to increase your HP, your stamina, or your spirit any further, but there is extra ticks that you should be able to do. Now, the reason this is locked is actually locked behind research, which is a pretty hidden feature in the game unless you actually go out and search it. So there are multiple of these little research centers in the game that can give you specific upgrades or even teach you how to use like certain materials that you had no idea how to use before. But there's 3 specifically that I want to focus on today, specifically for upgrading your HP, stamina, and spirit beyond their limits. So for HP, this is the Institute, which is the very first one of these you come across as part of the main story as well. Now at the research center here, you will need to progress through multiple nodes to actually reach that HP limit increase. And then once you have unlocked that, you'll be able to push your HP beyond that point by also using not only Abyss artifacts, but Abyss cells. I'll talk talk about how you can farm those in a little bit too. But stamina is linked to the Great Gate of Udavar, which is way up in the north in the Crimson Desert, and Spirit is actually not too far away from the Institute in the Porian Forest. All these really require, once you have actually done the observation research in the area, is essentially silver investment and time in game, as there will require you a decent amount of silver, and will solve all of your silver problems in this video as well. But really it's just that time aspect and then progressing through them. But you should always make sure you've got a research active at all of these different points so that you are actually progressing those research while you're just exploring the world, you know, having a good time. If you've been enjoying how beautiful and open the world is in Crimson Desert, with the amazing vistas and diverse landscapes filled with tons of activities and bosses to fight, then you should probably check out today's sponsor, Where Winds Meet. But if you've already played a ton of it, like I have, there's never been a better time to actually jump back in. Where Winds Meet has just launched its 1.5 update, which brings players to the Langzhou, a brand new snow region in the Hexi chapter. That, yes, might look stunning, but more importantly, snow camels. Need I say more? One of my favorite things about Where Winds Meet is the exploration, and I can't wait to explore this new region. But that's not all that's being added. If you like combat, there's a brand new weapon, the Hyang Blade, a traditional Chinese weapon to try. A new weapon would be nothing without new bosses, and there are 5 brand new bosses added with version 1.5 to test your combat skills against, like the Moon Gazing Maiden, which has a unique second phase where players will be unable to use their martial arts skills and rely heavily on deflection. But just look at this amazing boss arena and the music too. Where Winds Meet is available on PC, PS5, and mobile. It's completely free to play, so definitely check it out using my link in the description. Thanks, Where Winds Meet, for sponsoring this video. A quick one that has been a little bit all over the internet, but in case you missed it, there is a easy inventory expansion bag that respawns every in-game 7 days. It's actually found to the south-ish of the Hills of No Return in the Hernan region. Just near this wagon here, you'll find a bag that gives you 10 additional inventory spaces that will respawn every 7 in-game days. Something to note is that if you have maxed out your inventory space at 240, this bag and any of the other inventory expansions will now, as of a new patch, give you materials and resources when you do get them. So you'll actually still be getting something from them, even if you are actually already at a maxed point with your bags. All right, let's talk about gold bars and investing, and I guess taxes as well, as they do come into play here a little bit. But the main thing I wanted to point out here is that gold bars and money in general is so easy to get in Crimson Desert. Like, obviously there is the pickpocket method from the Demonis Wildlife Park. By the way, that is still working in the current patch, where you will see NPCs by shining your light on them. They will have gold bars like stashed, and you can bump into them and pickpocket them from them, and essentially you can just do this endlessly. Now, if you did have the Ledger main Abyss gear equipped, by the way, you'll have a percentage chance of actually getting an extra gold bar if you do farm them. But I wanted to talk about a more legitimate way of actually getting gold bars, and essentially a way that you can farm them by just crafting them yourself. Funnily enough, you're basically just crafting money. So there is a gold bar recipe inside the Spire of Insight. Now, this is the spire that is in Hernan. Now, essentially all you need to know about actually how to climb this tower is you'll need to look at the book and see the item that is displayed on that book, and then find that item in the room. For the first one, it's the gravestone, and then the next one, it is the telescope and the pen, I believe. And then from there, it'll take you to those next levels. But on that 3rd level is actually where you find that gold bar recipe. And then you essentially can now craft gold bars. But what you'll need is brimstone, mercury, and silver. Brimstone is found in the Deadfire Mountains most commonly. Now, depending on where you're at in the story here, this area may have enemies around it. Do keep that in mind. But basically what you need to do here is you'll see these like gas pockets coming out of these boulders. You'll need to use the healing force palm specifically to block 2 of the 3 gas pockets on one of these boulders, and then use the nature snare ability with your force palm, which you will have to unlock all of these in your skill tree, by the way. And then once you've done that, you'll actually see like a little icon start glowing, and then you can release it, and then a bunch of brimstone will just spawn out of that location.
Oh, there it is.
There's a bunch of these around that location that you can do. Now, mercury is actually found nearby the Deadfire Mountains, by the way. There's actually a pool of it there. But the main one that I found was actually in the Silverwolf Mountains. Mercury is essentially like a pool of water, except it has this really distinct glow to it. And in order to take it out, you will need the ice element and have upgraded the imbue element to be able to shoot ice arrows, or the imbue element on your arrows. Then you'll need to put ice in the water. That'll freeze it and turn it into mercury. And the last one's actually a lot easier. That's silver. There is actually a silver cave in Hernan that you'll just need to use the waterfall stab technique to go through. There's a bunch of silver in there. Pro tip though, don't use any other way of getting this silver and just resources in general other than the mining knuckle, which I did touch on where to get in a previous video, because it gives you a 10% chance to get extra ore, but also if you upgrade it, that chance increases to 20% and then 30%. So you'll get even more silver, and it's now auto added to your inventory as of the last patch as well. But if you don't want to trek all the way up to the Deadfire Mountains to get your mercury and your brimstone, at the Scholar's Stone Institute, by the way, you can actually just gift hide to all the ogres here that have scholar or professor, etc. as their name. And once you have maxed out their trust, they will just give you either brimstone, mercury, or rubber. Now, mercury and brimstone are the two ones we want to focus on here, but something else to note is that if you reload a save, those NPCs will reset, so you can just keep doing that over and over again, and then you can just essentially farm brimstone and mercury from the scholars at the Institute. All right, so now that you've got all of these resources, you can take them to a witch and craft the gold bars for yourself. Now, it is a little bit expensive. You will require a lot of the brimstone, mercury, and silver, but you can essentially just craft it and get 500 silver, as when you take a gold bar to the bank specifically, you can trade it in for 500 silver rather than selling it at a vendor, which you'll get significantly less from doing so. And then speaking of the bank, by the way, if you're wondering if investing is actually worth it, it kind of is, but it kind of isn't at the same time, because it's so easy just to make money that it's not really necessary for you to spend a lot of investments and, you know, dump all of your gold into that and see what you get. Now, the riskier investments you can definitely lose, but if you have a save file that's right before the investment ticks over, you can actually reload that save, see what you get, and then like save scum it as you typically would save scum anything in the game, really. But ultimately, I've found that because it's so easy just to get gold, actually investing isn't totally worth it. By the way, there is actually a gold mission dispatch as well, so you can just get them by having your Greymanes go out and get it for you, but I'll tell you where to get that in a little bit. So I assume you have been upgrading your camp and doing all of the Greymane quests to unlock all of the new vendors and everything you can get from there. If you did watch my other advanced tips video, by the way, that I showed you can actually move a lot of the city vendor stock to your camp by maxing out their trust. By the way, there is actually a hidden camp vendor, which is where you get the full Grey Wolf set. That is like the cover art that Cliff wears, as well as all those trailers. They are actually found in the Demoness region in the north. There's a location here you'll need to go to and then just start a quest. Complete that quest for the tailor, and then that tailor will then move to the camp and you can buy the full Grey Wolf set from them. One other thing I wanted to note is that water wells, by the way, in the last patch have now been added, so you can farm water from them. So any water wells you see in the game, you can farm water, which is just a huge benefit, so you don't have to run around and buy it from all the different vendors. But the big thing about the camp, by the way, is that if you stand on the fast travel node, the Abyss Nexus, you will remove like most of the loading screen that you get, even though in the last patch they did reduce the loading screen time it takes to actually load into new areas. If you stand on an Abyss Nexus, that like initial like animation just goes away. You just get a black screen and then it'll just load you to the next location. So you'll even further reduce that loading time, especially if you are jumping around to multiple locations like I happen to quite a lot. Now, I mentioned that there are hidden puzzles inside puzzles, and that is true. Firstly, with sanctums, did you know that every single sanctum, every single one, has a hidden chest somewhere in that sanctum that has a unique piece of gear? Some of these are really easy to find, some of them are really, really hard, but every single one has one, so make sure for all the sanctums you're doing, you are getting that chest. Now, the main tip here is that there is actually a hidden puzzle once you have cleansed the sanctum. So if you look at a specific side of the like sanctum cleansing thing that you had to rebuild, there will be this like circular dial with these like little pip nodes on it. What you need to do here is use your focus light and like time the focus light presses with the crystals so that it lights up those crystals. It'll play a sound when you're doing this right. Just for real, this is really frustrating to do, like getting the timing on these rights. Like I really struggle to get these right, and I find it infuriating to do. But once you do get them right, and you will actually get a unique item out of it, a unique crafting item that you can then grab and seal it into your cuckoo pot, because you'll need to take it back to the cuckoo pot vendor, and each sanctum specifically has a unique one of these. So you'll need to do all the ones from the different sanctums to get the unique one from them. But why should you do this? Well, a couple of reasons. You may have noticed like the backpack option in your inventory and everything. The cuckoo packs are actually linked to this, and there are a bunch of really cool things that they can do that I'm probably going to cover in a separate video as it's sort of a guide in itself as to how to unlock some of this stuff. So we'll save that for later. But the main thing that I wanted to point out here is that the easiest ones that you can get is the cuckoo resistant armor, which is actually really valuable to get. So you know that frost curse armor that you've probably seen around and probably gone and got yourself, same as the scorch plate armor, these can actually be upgraded to be cuckoo resistance, which further increases the amount of ice or fire resistance they have to level 10, which essentially means that when you go to those regions of the map, you just switch out your chest piece to that armor and you're basically fine. Like, you won't lose that stamina reduction you get from being cold or hot. But that is sort of the main tip here, is that you should be carrying different types of armor for different scenarios. So when you're in the ice, right, make sure you've got armor that is ice resistant, same for fire. And these cuckoo resistant armors essentially make that so much easier. You just got to carry the one piece and then just switch that out, keep all of your abyss gear and all your other pieces, and you're basically fine. I also kind of like the idea of having a specific armor for, say, crafting, as you can get ones that'll save you materials, or even for stealing, things like that you can like switch to for certain scenarios. Think of it like Zelda, right? You know, in Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, you're sort of switching armor depending on the situation. I think that's what you should be thinking of for Crimson Desert, especially in the later game when you have really progressed, and you know, now with all these inventory improvements as well, it's sort of the direction you can take that. But there's a couple of other things with the armor as well to note. By the way, with certain helmets, if you interact with the helmet like on the radio wheel without changing it, you'll actually be able to pull the visor up and down, and you can actually do the same thing with certain like cloaks as well. You can actually put the hood up and down as well, so you can sort of get a specific aesthetic if you're looking for, which is really cool. I just like that feature.
Peekaboo!
All right, but let's talk about some secret mission dispatches. Now, in the Bordeg Ruins, that you have to unlock this camp just by clearing it out, as you do with a lot of these camps, that is where you can find a gold mission dispatch. It is quite expensive to send your Greymanes off to do that, but if you are investing a lot in the camps and everything like you should, and whether you've moved them to Payloon yet or not, that is really important to do, is to basically have like missions set up where a lot of your Greymane people are basically just on a rotating mission to collect different resources for you. Now, once you have got contribution from the church, by the way, you can actually just send like contribution people instead of actually sending your Greymane, so you can have multiple of your missions going at once, rather than say you've got one mission that is to collect lumber but having to send 3 or 4 of your own Greymanes. Now you can send one that has that buff to logging and then actually send the contribution people instead, so you're still getting all of those benefits. There is another one for Abyss artifacts as well, by the way, the Time-Worn Ruins to the south of the Crimson Desert. You just need to clear out this camp and you can essentially send someone to go and farm like an unlimited amount of Abyss artifacts for you there. Another thing to note about these mission dispatches is that they can actually change the world as well, not just like cosmetic stuff. Like the early game one that I did was build a wolf statue in Hernand. Some nobles might actually ask you to build bridges and other things in the world that can make traverse a little bit easier and just actually change the landscape for you. You can also go and visit the Greymanes while they're on their missions, which is I think a cool little detail I noticed the other day, is that when you have these Greymanes that are out on the missions, they'll actually be at those locations. You can like see them there and go and talk to them because they're, you know, out on mission. Some combat tricks for you. Firstly, focusing is so important in and out of combat, but specifically in combat. One thing to note is that when you are focusing, you can actually use the focus force palm in combat to hit things that are further away, like those Abyss gem bosses, by the way. They have that gem that float around. You need to hit those gems to stun them, to like deal better damage to them. You can actually use the focus force palm to like hit them with that. Like, I think that's a really cool little tech that you can do. Also, focus is great just to dodge attacks in combat because it slows down time, gives you more time to react, whether you're going to block, deflect, or dodge, etc. And also, shield bashing, by the way, will actually disarm enemies, which is something I did not know because I barely use a shield. But funnily enough, if a enemy is attacking you and you shield bash during that same window, there's a strong chance that their sword, shield, whatever they're using will actually fly off and be on the ground, and your pet will be able to pick it up, or you can pick it up after the fight. But I think that's just another really cool detail for combat. That also means that they'll attack you unarmed, which can be really great if you're in a scenario with lots of enemies that you're fighting. So disarming them will mean they'll do less damage, be less dangerous to you if there are lots that you're just trying to like get through. You've probably seen those back alley vendors that you can buy keys and the disguise kit and everything from, but some of them actually will sell you Abyss gear as well. And not just any Abyss gear, unique boss Abyss gear. Like for example, the one in Hernand will sell you the wind slash that you get from the end of chapter 2. So when you do come across these in all the major cities, as there is one in all the major cities, make sure you are checking out their inventories. But if you just want to craft your own Abyss gear, by the way, and just generally like how to farm Abyss, sell, spells and Abyss gear, do check out my Abyss gear video that I'll link right here for you. Now, there's a few new movement tricks, and movement has been tweaked a little bit in the last patch as well. So firstly, we all were using that air stab to like get additional air. This has actually been tweaked slightly and now has its own unique animation. So you can do that air stab by essentially double jumping and then look up and then use like R1 and triangle for PS5 or whatever it is on Xbox to like use the stab ability upwards once you have unlocked it in the skill tree, and then it'll propel you up in the air even further, and you can use this on top of like the force palming down that we're all using anyway. While the stamina upgrades have made a massive improvement to just gliding around, as it doesn't use as much stamina now in the recent patch, if you use focus while you're gliding and then use the aerial dash and then use R1 for an additional boost, you'll be able to like boost out of your glide, which gives you way more distance and way more speed, so you can get even further when you are using your like flying around and movement abilities. And the last thing on movement, by the way, is if you have a banner, you can actually pole vault off that rather than double jumping, so you can get a little bit extra height and just gives you a bit more of extra movement tech as well. Now, I have spent a bit of time the other day testing the 5 new legendary mounts, which if you didn't know, in the latest patch, Polar Abyss added the Snow White Deer, the Alpine Ibex, the Warthog, the Silver Fang, and the White Bear as mounts. Now, in order to unlock these, you essentially just need to go to the legendary locations of those creatures, defeat them, skin them, and then take the item you get back to the witch, and then you'll be able to like craft them out from there. Unfortunately, they don't have any stats right now, like in terms of their movement speed, things like that, which is a bit disappointing. But it's worth noting that some of these mounts have unique things that just aren't even listed. Like, for example, the Warthog, the Silver Fang, and the White Bear will actually just attack for you and like fight with you in combat. Now, for the Warthog and the Silver Fang, it's not great because they both have quite a low amount of HP and not a ton of attacks. But for the White Bear, it's actually really good. The White Bear has a raw attack which stuns enemies around you. It also has a massive health pool, so it will survive a lot longer and attack enemies a bit better. By the way, you can heal your White Bear and your other mounts too, by the way, by using that healing force palm. We use force palm and then press the other analog stick in for the healing version, so you can keep them alive in those encounters. But the White Bear is definitely the best of these new mounts. And to get the White Bear, by the way, in the north of Payloon to the west of the Silver Wolf Mountains is where you will find the location where the White Bear is. It's actually right near where you get Darkbringer, by the way. It's just around that area. But the White Bear is definitely the one that I would be gunning for. The others are fine. Like the Silver Fang is kind of cool in terms of its looks, but the White Bear is definitely the best in combat. If you're still looking for more Crimson Desert content, I will link my early game build for Cliff right here for you that goes through how the Golden Lightning build works that I made. So do check that out. But thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.